Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of fire, ironing, and aching hands. You're about to live the brutal, blistered, soot-stained life of a medieval blacksmith, and no, you probably won't survive this. Sorry, but your lungs are going to fill with coal dust, you'll likely burn off a few fingerprints, and if you somehow make it to 45, you'll be considered ancient. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always like to picture someone in, say, rural Poland at 1:13 AM, just drifting off as we hammer through history together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born to the clang of iron. Not just metaphorically, you actually enter the world in a cramped cottage behind your father's forge. Your first lullaby, the rhythmic beat of hammer on anvil and the deep wheeze of the bellows. Even before you can walk, you learn that soot finds every crevice, and that nothing in the house is ever truly clean. Your mother scrubs your cheeks until they are raw, but by nightfall you look like you've been rolled in chimney ash. It doesn't help that your older siblings treat the scrap pile like a toy chest. Everything's a weapon or a tool. You swing iron tongs like a sword and lose a fingernail to a misjudged smack from a half-made horseshoe. By 5 years old, your daily chores already revolve around the forge. You carry buckets of coal from the storehouse, each one heavier than your little arms should manage. Your palms blister, then callous. At first you cry, but after a while you just press your lips together and take it. Pain becomes background noise. The ache in your back, normal. The grit in your eyes, constant. The smell of burnt hair, yours probably. Your father doesn't offer much in the way of praise. A grunt means, good job. And silence means, you didn't screw it up too badly. He's missing 3 fingers on his left hand and walks with a limp he never explains. There's an iron plate nailed to the inside wall of the forge with a black streak running down it. Your father once told you that was what happens when someone drops molten iron. You don't ask twice. The forge itself is a living thing. When it's hot, it breathes with a roar. When it sleeps, it murmurs. You start to recognise its moods. You know the different songs the hammer sings depending on the metal, and you can tell good coal from bad by the colour of the flame. Your hearing is going, though. There's a constant ringing in your ears, even when you lie awake at night listening to the dogs bark and wondering if the rats will find your bread stash. The other village kids think you're weird. You never show up for games, and your clothes always smell like smoke. One girl teases you about your hands, blackened, cracked, rough. You don't even hear what she says, because you're busy admiring the way the sun hits a neighbour's plough, wondering how thick the iron is, and whether it's high carbon or not. At 10 years old, your idea of a crush is someone who appreciates proper tempering. Your hands begin to echo your father's. Muscle memory takes hold. You learn to swing the hammer from the elbow, not the wrist. You figure out how to draw out a piece of metal without wasting coal. And for your first real project? A crude knife, ugly as sin and about as sharp as a potato, but your father nods once when he tests the grip. That's practically a full-blown standing ovation. Here's a historical truth. The blacksmith in a medieval village was more essential than the local baker. Farmers needed tools, knights needed weapons, the church needed locks, even the undertaker needed nails. You don't become rich, but you're never without work. Still, most of the villagers treat you like part of the scenery, something that should exist but shouldn't speak too loudly. You eat last at feasts and pray in the back pew. A quirky little reality. You're legally not allowed to leave your job without permission. That's right. Depending on the century and kingdom, certain skilled trades like yours are so valuable that nobles make it illegal for blacksmiths to wander off and become wandering mercenaries. Or worse, work for a rival lord. You're not quite a prisoner, but you're definitely not free. Even if your feet itch for the open road, you stay, because if you leave, no one else will fix the plough that feeds the village. And besides, you've got too much work. Now here's the open debate historians like to grumble over ale. Just how respected were you really? Some say blacksmiths were the backbone of society, revered, even feared a little, as swore, like wizards of flame and metal. Others argue you were basically treated like manual labourers with slightly shinier tools. The truth is probably both. People need you, but they don't really want to sit next to you at the alehouse. You smell like scorched leather and sulphur, and if they see your eyes glowing orange from working late, some whisper about devils in the smoke. But none of that matters tonight. You lie on a pile of hay and wool scraps near the forge, your clothes still tacky with sweat, your ears buzzing. Outside, the night is thick and cool, full of crickets and distant dogs. Inside, the forge hums like a sleeping dragon, and your hands, your burnt, blistered, powerful hands, rest across your chest like iron tools cooling for the next day. You don't know it yet, but this life is going to shape you into something harder than steel, and just as likely to crack under the right kind of pressure. Morning comes early, and it doesn't ask permission. You're awake before the sun, not because you're eager, but because your back is screaming from the same bed of straw and cinders you collapsed into last night. You stretch, joints crack like kindling, and the first breath of air brings in the lovely bouquet of singed wool, coal dust, and yesterday's sweat. There's no breakfast waiting, just a chunk of hard bread left over from 2 days ago and a watered-down ale that tastes vaguely of rust. It's not that glamorous, but hey, at least no one's stealing your food. No one wants to touch anything that smells like forge grease and half-burnt goat hide. By the time the village rooster starts squawking, you're already feeding the fire. The forge is always hungry, and it doesn't like to be kept waiting. You work the bellows with your foot, watching as the embers blush back to life, licking at the coal until flames stretch upward like they're trying to taste the rafters. Your father appears behind you without a word. He's already chewing something, probably onion. He hands you a rusted iron bar and mutters, "Draw it out." And just like that, the day begins. You set the bar on the anvil, grip the hammer, and swing. The first few strikes feel awkward. Your wrist still aches from yesterday, and your fingers are swollen from sleeping with your hands curled into fists. But your body remembers what your mind is too tired to think through. After a while, you find the rhythm. Hammer, turn, strike, reheat, hammer, turn, strike. The metal yields slowly. Not like in the stories. There's no magical transformation here. Just force, repetition, sweat, and swearing. As an apprentice, you do the worst jobs. That includes cleaning the latrine buckets, fetching coal, oiling the tools, and standing in the smoke to keep wasps out of the workspace. They hate the fumes, you hate the wasps slightly more. You also get to stir the slag pile, the goopy waste left over from smelting. It's sticky, hot, and somehow always ends up on your boots. And of course you spend a glorious amount of time turning the grinding wheel while someone else sharpens something shiny and dangerous right in front of your nose. One slip and it's your eye, or your lip, or memorably your cousin's entire ear. Still you learn, slowly, painfully. You learn to listen to metal. Sounds strange, but it's true. Cold iron rings with a different pitch than hot. When you strike steel that's too cool, the sound is sharp and angry. When it's hot enough, it sings back, a deep musical hum that tells you it's ready to be shaped. Miss that window and the whole piece could crack, warp, or snap when cooled. Your father never scolds you for being slow, but if he hears that wrong ring, he smacks the anvil hard enough to make your ears pop and walks away shaking his head. You start to take pride in the little things, straightening nails so perfectly they look like they were spat out by angels, or twisting decorative ironwork with just the right balance of force and flair. One afternoon you manage to forge a gate latch that actually clicks shut on the first try. Your father says nothing, but later you notice he mounted it on the main gate instead of giving it away. That's practically a parade in your honour. You also begin noticing the differences in metal. Wrought iron is soft, forgiving. Mild steel is trickier, stronger, but more brittle when overworked. And then there's high carbon steel, the stuff of blades. That's a monster. Too hot and it burns. Too cool and it shatters. You learn to judge the heat by the colour of the glow. Dull red is warm, orange is workable, bright yellow is ideal, and white means you're one heartbeat away from ruining everything. Historical fact for tonight. Many blacksmith apprentices started as early as age 7 and stayed apprentices until their late teens. That's a full decade or more of doing what you're doing now, being tired, burned, dirty, and frequently yelled at. There was no such thing as summer vacation. You worked through harvests, winters, holy days, unless you lost a limb or dropped dead. And sometimes, even that wasn't an excuse. And here's a weird detail not many people talk about. You start dreaming about fire. No joke. The dreams feel real. You wake up thinking you've scorched your blanket, or that someone's shouting at you to check the bellows. Sometimes you hear the hiss of quenching even while you're walking through the market. The sounds stick with you. It's like the forge gets into your bones and refuses to leave. Now, among scholars, there's some debate about just how much an apprentice was allowed to create on their own. Some say apprentices spent years without ever touching anything bigger than a nail. Others argue that by year 3 or 4 you might be making full tools, horseshoes, or even small weapons, under supervision of course. From your side of the anvil though, it feels like they're letting you do just enough to keep you hopeful, but not enough to let you mess anything up. Your body changes too. You're lean but strong in weird places, forearms like stone but legs that wobble by midday. Your skin stays rough no matter how much you wash, and your fingernails? Black, always. You could scrub them with lye and a copper brush and still find soot caked under there. You start measuring days not by sunrise or vespers, but by how long your left arm hurts after hammering out a bolt. One afternoon while you're stoking the fire, an older apprentice shows you a trick, how to cheat the edge on a blade using a bone-handled file and a tiny puff of beeswax. It's not exactly guild-approved, but it works. The blade sparkles, and when he flicks it against a strip of dried pigskin, it slices through like cloth. He grins and says, "Don't tell your dare, you won't. But you'll remember. By the end of this year you'll be stronger, yes, smarter probably, but mostly you'll be tired. Tired in a way that doesn't go away after a nap. It settles deep, behind your ribs, in your spine, like a shadow you carry everywhere. But that's the price of learning. That's the cost of the hammer. The forge never stops needing you. And somehow that feels like purpose. There's a rhythm to it now, kind of strange, pounding music that guides your days and fills your nights with phantom echoes. Hammer, bellows, anvil, quench. Again, the forge becomes an extension of your own body, almost like a second set of lungs, hissing and panting in time with your own breath. You don't even notice the soot in your hair anymore. It's just part of you, the same way the scars on your knuckles are, or the streak of ash that lives permanently on the side of your nose. By the time you're 13, you've been around the forge longer than you've been anywhere else in your life, and you've grown into the rhythm whether you wanted to or not. The days start before dawn with a heavy clunk of the shop door and the soft thump of coal being dumped into the fire pit. You step inside, already sweating just from thinking about the heat to come. It's a deep, muscle-soaking warmth that doesn't come from the sun but from the angry red centre of the earth. At least that's what it feels like when the fire is full and the forge is alive. You pump the bellows with your foot and feel the air rush through the coals, watching them spark and hiss as the fire surges up. There's no talking in the mornings, just breath, flame and motion. Your father gives you small tasks now, though never without a sceptical grunt. You shape brackets, rivets, hinges, things the villagers won't notice unless they break. Every now and then you're trusted with something more ambitious, a hinge for the church door, a latch for the alehouse, or a decorative cross meant to hang over a sick child's crib. You don't talk about the pressure, but it weighs on you. You can feel it in your jaw, clenched tight even when you're alone. Every piece you make carries your name, even if no one says it out loud. You can't afford to fail, not here, not with your father watching. The forge is louder now that your ears have started ringing more consistently. It's not even the hammering that gets you. It's the roar of the bellows and the shriek of metal when it's quenched too fast. There's something primal about that sound, like the metal is screaming out from the shock of it. You've done it yourself, yanked a glowing hot blade straight into water because you weren't thinking, or because you were rushing, or maybe just because you wanted to hear that sizzle and hiss. But every time the steel punishes you for your impatience, cracks straight down the centre, clean as a broken heart. Quenching is a science no one fully understands yet. Some blacksmiths swear by water, others swear by oil, boiling, stinking animal fat that makes your clothes reek for days. Your father even has an old story about a man who once quenched a blade in milk, said it gave the metal a softer soul. You don't know if that's true or if he's just testing whether you'll believe anything. But deep down, you kind of like the idea of metal having a soul. You've certainly spilled enough of yours into it. Here's a curious fact. The sound of hammering carries farther than you'd expect, and on a calm day, someone a mile away might hear the distant clang of your anvil and know the blacksmith is at work. That's why travelling merchants time their stops accordingly. They know when you're open just by listening. It gives you a strange kind of power. You don't speak much to people, but they all hear you anyway. There's an open debate among historians about how much blacksmiths influenced the architecture and layout of medieval villages. Some argue the forge sat at the centre like a heart, while others claim it was pushed to the outskirts to keep the noise and fire away from delicate thatched roofs. In your village, it's wedged just off the main square, close enough to be useful, far enough that no one blames you when the smoke blows into the bakery. You've got your own little corner of the world, and it smells like scorched leather and boiled hooves. And oh, the hooves. Some days, you're not shaping tools or weapons. You're working on horseshoes. You don't love it, if you're honest. Horses don't care how hot the forge is or how tired your hands are. They fidget, they kick, they poop at unfortunate moments. You learn to move quickly, duck low, keep your tools ready. You watch the farrier at work, admire how fast he scrapes and nails and shapes. But then it's your turn, and the moment you touch the hot shoe to the hoof, the smell hits you. Burnt keratin, like someone roasting fingernails. It makes your stomach twist, every time. But the villagers need their horses shod, so you hold your breath and hammer. Your arms are bigger now, and people are starting to notice. Not in a flattering way exactly, but in that quiet, wary way they reserve for people who might snap an axe handle without meaning to. You catch glances when you walk through the market. Kids whisper. One even calls you Iron Boy, which you pretend not to like. But secretly, yeah, it kind of rules. Your father lets you take charge of the fire more often now. That's a big deal. Managing the heat is everything. Too low and the metal won't shape, too high and it burns. You start to see the colour shifts without thinking. The dull red glow of soft metal, the fierce orange of the sweet spot, the blinding white that means you've overdone it. You learn to smell when the fire needs more air, to hear when it's dying. You become fluent in flame. Some days you get cocky. You try to show off, double striking, spinning the hammer, throwing a piece of scrap into the air and catching it just right. And of course that's the day you misjudge the grip, and the hot iron sins across the room, narrowly missing your father's shoulder. He doesn't say anything, but his silence is worse than shouting. You don't try that again. The forge teaches you patience. It doesn't care how tired you are. It doesn't care if your hands shake or your muscles ache or your mind drifts. If you want the metal to listen, you have to earn it, every time. By now you've figured out that blacksmithing isn't just work. It's a conversation. The metal talks back. It resists, yields, changes. It remembers every mistake you make. And if you're good, if you're really lucky, it'll forgive you. A little. You start to realise that blacksmiths are the secret heartbeat of the village. People don't always look you in the eye or say your name, but they come. Always. When something breaks or needs building. In the space of a single week, you might mend a rusted sickle for a farmer, rivet a broken kettle for the innkeeper's wife, and reshoe 3 different horses that absolutely despise you. They all say just a quick fix, but you know better. Nothing's quick when you're dealing with warped metal and people with no patience. It's not glamour about, but you are essential. Without you, no one ploughs, no one harvests, no one rides into battle. The village needs your fire more than it needs prayers, though you'd never say that out loud. The priest already looks at you sideways, as if the glowing embers are a bit too close to hellfire for his liking. Not that he can do without you either. His hinges squeak, his locks stick, and you're the one who fixed the heavy iron bell clapper last winter when it cracked clean through. After that, he mumbled a slightly less passive-aggressive blessing in your general direction. It's not just tools and weapons, though. People bring you strange requests. The baker wants a bread stamp in the shape of a lion. The widow down the road needs a metal comb for her wool. A carpenter asks for tiny ornate nails that don't split his wood. You don't ask questions, you make what they need, and then they nod their thanks with an awkward shuffle of feet like it pains them to be grateful. Every now and then someone leaves a boiled egg or a slice of pie on the edge of your workbench. You take it without a word, but those are the offerings you remember most. You're old enough now to know this isn't normal work. It's punishing. Most days, your muscles burn by noon. Your fingers stay stiff until the forge heats up and your blood flows again. There's a fatigue that seeps into your bones, a kind of quiet, aching emptiness that follows you even when you're not swinging a hammer. Your clothes are permanently stained, your boots smell like damp leather and regret, and there's a soot halo on the ceiling above your bed where your hair touches the wall each night. You've stopped trying to scrub it clean. There's also a social distance between you and the rest of the village, not because you want it, but because it just happens. You don't have time to gossip, and you always look like you've wrestled a chimney. So you become a fixture, like the well or the tavern sign. Useful, respected, but not quite human in the eyes of your neighbours. A few boys your age are training with the Reeves Guard, learning how to swing swords instead of forge them. You watch them sometimes from across the square, when your arms are full of iron and sweat. They look carefree, they laugh. You don't. Still, something strange happens the first time a noble sends someone to your door. It's a page boy in fine wool with bad teeth and too much attitude. He holds out a rolled-up scrap of parchment like he's delivering the word of God himself. The Baron wants a new latch for his hunting chest first. A small job, but a noble one. Your father takes the paper and hands it to you. "Your turn," he says. You spend hours making it perfect, filing every corner smooth, etching a small sunburst into the plate. Not because they asked, but because you want them to see the work. You package it in clean cloth and deliver it yourself, hands trembling slightly when the manor gates creak open and the guards eye you like you're carrying a plague. But when they see the metalwork, something shifts. They nod. You're not just a village boy covered in ash anymore. You're the blacksmith's apprentice, the one who made that. And just like that, your reputation grows. Slowly, awkwardly, but it spreads. A knight's squire asks for a replacement buckle for his sword belt. The miller wants you to reinforce the axle pin on his cart. A tanner needs a special knife to strip hides more efficiently. You don't sleep much these days, but you start to carry yourself differently. Not proudly exactly, but with a certain weight. Like someone who knows they're needed, even if no one ever quite says it. Here's a historical nugget that might surprise you. Blacksmiths often doubled as dentists. Yes, really. You've heard whispers of it, and one grim afternoon it becomes real when this man from the outskirts shows up holding his jaw and begging for help. He's got a rotted molar and no coin for a healer. Your father looks at you, shrugs and pulls out the tongs. The man screams. You hold him down. Later you find the tooth in the ashes. You poke it with a coal rake, still smoking. And there's an ongoing academic debate that ties into this moment. Were blacksmiths considered craftsmen or quasi-healers? It's fuzzy. In many small towns, people came to you when there were no other options. That might mean a cracked wheel, or it might mean an infected foot you lance with a heated blade. It wasn't glamorous, and you didn't get paid like a physician, but in the eyes of the villagers, hot iron fixed more than just metal. Evening falls, and you're still working. The forge bathes the room in gold and orange. Everything else is shadows and ash. You're shaping a door knocker now, something elegant, curled like a serpent. Your hand is cramping, your thumb feels bruised, but you keep going. Every beat of the hammer feels like punctuation. This is what you do. The village square is quiet now, only the soft clatter of hooves in the distance and the occasional bark of a stray dog. You step outside for a breath, the air cool and sharp in your nose. Your apron is stiff with sweat and grime, your hair damp under your cap. But there's something satisfying about the ache in your arms, like a job well done, or at least done enough to keep the world running for one more day. You sit on a barrel and look at your hands. They don't look like they belong to a kid anymore. They look like tools, instruments, weathered and hard and capable of pain and power in equal measure. And you know, deep in your bones, that you're not just fixing broken things, you're building the world around you, one swing at a time. You're halfway through hammering out a scythe blade when a farmer wanders in with something new, an iron restraint he wants reforged. You turn it over in your hands, confused at first. It's too small for a door latch, too blunt for a tool. Then you realise it's part of a collar, a shackle for a person. The farmer offers a vague explanation about a troublesome worker, avoids your eyes, and tosses a few copper coins on the bench. Your father takes the job without a word. You forge the piece in silence, the heat suddenly heavier than usual. That's the dark side of your craft. You don't just make tools and horseshoes. Sometimes you're asked to forge weapons, restraints, even implements of torture. Iron, after all, has no morals. It does what it's told. You shape it with your hands, but you don't always get to choose what it becomes. Later that week, a constable brings you an axe head, cracked from overuse. He says it belongs to the executioner in a nearby town and that he needs it sharpened real nice. You pretend not to shudder when you notice the reddish-black stains along the blade's edge. The constable chuckles and tells you not to worry. The axe doesn't bite unless it has to. It's meant as a joke, but it sticks in your head for days. When you work on weapons, something changes. The metal feels meaner somehow. You catch your reflection in a polished sword blade and don't quite recognise yourself. The face is the same, but older, heavier around the eyes. You try not to dwell on what your work will do once it leaves your hands, but you can't help wondering, how many lives does a blacksmith take without ever lifting a weapon? Still, the villagers keep coming. A woodsman wants a cleaver that won't dull, even on knotty wood. A butcher asks for a curved boning knife with a handle that won't slip when bloodied. You fulfill each request with quiet precision, even when your knuckles split from the cold or your arms tremble after 12 straight hours of hammering. One cold morning, a travelling merchant arrives with a pile of strange tools and an even stranger request. He needs repairs on something you've never seen before. Curved spikes, a hinged trap, and a set of claws meant to fasten around a beam. You examine the parts carefully, then realise this is a bear trap. The merchant grins, says it's for catching wolves too. You patch the broken pieces and watch as he folds it closed and locks it with a grin. When he leaves, he whistles like he's just picked up fresh bread. You clean your workbench twice that day. Here's a lesser-known historical truth. Medieval blacksmiths weren't just tied to local work. Travelling merchants, knights, and even royal messengers would stop in to get items repaired. That meant every forge was also a checkpoint, a rumour mill, and a resting place for stories of distant battles or plague outbreaks or strange portents in the sky. You hear it all while stoking the flames. And here's something quirky for you. Some blacksmiths were believed to have the power to ward off evil. People would hang iron horseshoes above their doors, sometimes ones you yourself had forged. They'd bury bits of wrought iron at the corners of their homes, or wear small metal charms for protection. They didn't trust you as a person necessarily, but they trusted the fireborn objects you created. That makes you feel weirdly like a middleman between man and magic, an unspoken priest of smoke and steel. There's an ongoing debate among medieval scholars about the emotional toll this job took. Sure, we know the physical costs, burns, cuts, smashed fingers, but emotionally, not many records survive to tell that story. Were blacksmiths hardened and stoic, or did they quietly carry every blade, chain and nail they'd ever made? It's hard to say, but standing here now, watching your own breath cloud the air, hands trembling slightly after sharpening an executioner's tool, you know the answer for yourself. This work changes you. You see the village differently now. You notice the hinges on every door, the clasps on every belt, the horseshoes beneath every hoof. You can't look at anything without thinking about how it was made, who forged it, how many strikes it took to bend it into shape. Your world has become a tapestry of metal and motion, and you're woven into all of it. But that doesn't make you popular. You're still the boy with soot in his eyelashes and scars across his palms. When you walk into the alehouse, the chatter dips just slightly. You try to ignore it, but it's there. You sit by yourself, sipping thin beer and listening to conversations about crop failures, marriages and missing sheep. No one invites you to the fire. You smell too much like smoke. You do have one kind of friend, the widow's dog, big, shaggy and dumb as a sack of nails. He waits for you outside the shop most mornings, tail wagging. You feed him scraps when you can, bits of bread or half a sausage if you're lucky. He doesn't flinch at the sound of hammering. He just curls up outside and watches the door, like he's waiting for something. You start calling him Cole. One evening a strange request comes in. A woman, quiet and nervous, asks for something delicate. A small set of rings to link together, almost like jewellery, but meant to be hidden. She won't say what they're for. You don't art. You forge them late at night, when the forge glows dim and the air is thick with whispers. When she picks them up, she leaves an extra coin on the table and walks away quickly, head down. You lie awake after that, wondering, was she building a trap, a signal, a piece of armour no one would see? You'll never know, but you'll think about her every time you forge another chain link by link. That night you dream again. The forger is cold in your dream, but the coals beneath the ash start to stir. You reach for the bellows, but your hands are missing. In their place, tongs and hammers. You try to scream, but all that comes out is the ringing of an anvil. You wake up covered in sweat, and then it's morning again. Time to feed the fire. Feast days mean extra business. People want their carts fixed before travelling, their cooking pots patched up for communal meals, and their boots reshod for the dancing that follows a good harvest. You'd think celebration would be a time for rest, but for you, it's when the orders pile up like firewood in winter. The blacksmith's forge becomes the pre-party, the behind-the-scenes engine keeping everything else moving. And then, just like that, the rush is over, and silence creeps in. That's the pattern, bursts of frantic work, followed by long weeks of waiting, your fingers twitching for something to hammer. You never quite know which day will bring a crowd and which will bring nothing but cold air and your own thoughts. Winter, though, is the worst. Not just because of the wind that creeps in under your collar, or the ice that turns your water buckets into useless lumps. It's the way everything slows. The coal burns faster, but it gives off less heat. Your tools grow stiff with frost, and your hammer handles start to crack unless you oil them constantly. Even the metal resists you more, brittle in the cold, sharp in ways you didn't expect. Most mornings in winter you keep your hands in your armpits until the forge gets hot enough to thaw them. You swing slower, start later, and by evening your breath is thick enough to see inside the shop. But the work never really stops. Hinges still rust, ploughs still break, and people still need you. especially when their fingers are too numb to fix things themselves. There's a village superstition that blacksmiths can speak to iron in a way others can't, that the fire listens to you and not to them. On icy mornings, when even lighting the forge is a battle, you start to wonder if there's some truth to it. Your father has always said the fire knows who fears it. You never quite believed him, until the day your sleeve catches fire. It happens so fast. 1 second you're leaning too close, trying to adjust a bar with your tongs, and the next your forearm lights up like a torch. You panic, flail, slam your arm into the water bucket, but not before the smell of singed skin hits your nose. It's not your worst burn, but it's close. The blistering begins almost immediately, a swelling welt that makes hammering agony for a week. Your father shrugs. "Now you've got the mark," he says, as if this was inevitable. You don't ask what he means, you just wrap your arm in rough linen and keep going. Here's something they don't teach you in the books. Pain is part of the apprenticeship. Not just emotional or philosophical, physical, throbbing, keep you up at night pain. Your burns don't heal right. Your knees crack when you bend. You have a cut on your thumb that never quite closes. You stop noticing. There's always something bleeding. Odd fact for tonight. Some medieval blacksmiths were known to use their own urine to quench iron. Not always, of course, but when oil or water wasn't available, they got creative. And to be fair, it has the nitrogen content to assist in tempering certain steels. You haven't done it yet, but you've heard the older apprentices joke about it. The thought is both disgusting and strangely logical. That's the forge, dirty, dangerous, but weirdly elegant in its own awful way. And scholars still debate whether blacksmithing was considered a respected job or merely a tolerated one. You've seen both sides. Nobles need you, but don't invite you to their tables. Villagers thank you, but won't share a drink. Priests bless your work, but look uncomfortable in your presence. It's like everyone knows they need your fire, but they're still scared of being burned. Food becomes harder to come by in the lean months. You trade labour for meat scraps, patch a shepherd's broken shears in exchange for a wedge of hard cheese. Once you help repair a kettle for an old woman, and she gives you a cabbage so old it practically walks itself to the compost heap. You boil it anyway. Hunger makes anything edible. You start keeping a stash of coins under a loose floorboard. Nothing dramatic, just a few small earnings here and there that your father lets you keep. It makes you feel rich, even though it's barely enough to buy a pair of decent boots. Still, you like to pull them out at night, turn them over in your hand, imagine what they might become. A whetstone maybe, or even a better file. You're not dreaming of castles or land, you're dreaming of better tools. Then comes the famine, a bad harvest followed by a colder than usual fall. You don't notice it at first, too busy with the post-harvest rush of broken sickles and jammed wagons. But then people stop coming. No one wants to spend coin unless they have to. You go 2 full days without a single visitor. On the 3rd, a man offers to trade you a goat carcass in exchange for a door bolt. You take it. The meat is tough, but it lasts. You learn how to make soup from bones, how to stretch stale bread with boiled onions. Your stomach shrinks, and your belt starts to hang loose. But the forge must still be tended. Even in famine, people need nails, so you work in silence. The forge's fire, your only real warmth, your body thin, but your will hardening like tempered steel. One night you sit beside the coals, too tired to stand. Cole, the dog rests his head on your foot and you stroke the back of his neck with fingers cracked from cold and work. You whisper to him. Not words, just sounds. It's the only voice you've used all day. Outside, the wind howls like a wounded animal, and the snow begins to fall in slow, deliberate flakes. You reach toward the fire with your good hand, and for a moment you feel something strange. Peace. Not happiness, not pride, just peace. Like the fire sees you, like it remembers everything you've made and everything you've lost, and it's just waiting with you now, warm and patient and eternal. And when the first knock comes at the door, a farmer with a cracked hoe and desperation in his eyes, you stand, wrap your burned arm tighter, and step into the orange glow once more. Infection starts small, just a pinch of red, maybe a little swelling. You barely notice it at first because your hands are always in some state of injury. Burns, bruises, calluses layered over scabs. It's a miracle you can feel anything at all. But this time the cut on your index finger isn't healing. It throbs constantly, deep in the flesh, like the iron itself got inside you and is trying to fight its way out. You clean it with cold water, You wrap it in cloth. Still, it worsens. By the second day, you can't hold the hammer properly. You switch hands and power through, refusing to let your father see you wince. He probably already knows, though. His glance lingers on your wrapped hand a beat too long. He's been through it. Every blacksmith has. Metalwork is dangerous, but infection is the real killer. Silent, creeping and merciless. If a cut goes bad and the rot sets in, there's no fire hot enough to stop it. Your finger begins to swell like a sausage left too long on the fire. The skin tightens, splits, leaks. You try to hide it, but Cole, ever loyal, keeps nudging your side and sniffing the bandage like he knows something's wrong. You start waking up with fever dreams, sweating and shivering, your skin hot to the touch. You think you hear your father praying once, quietly, in a language you don't recognise. Eventually, he takes your hand and doesn't say a word, just pulls a knife from the bench and cleans it in the flame. You panic, maybe cry a little, but you don't pull away. He digs in. The pain is blinding and you black out halfway through. When you wake, your finger is missing its nail, and the tip has been sliced open and drained. You feel like you've been gutted through the hand, but you're alive. For the next few days, you don't work. You can't. Your head swims, your stomach revolts at the smell of the wound, and your dreams are fevered nightmares. Flames with teeth, molten chains crawling up your arms. You lie near the forge, bundled in whatever you can find, drifting in and out of a sleep that doesn't feel restful. Cole lies beside you like a sentry. You hear the sound of metalwork continue, your father alone at the anvil. The rhythm is slower without you. Here's a grim historical truth. Infection was one of the biggest killers for smiths and apprentices alike. There were no antiseptics, no antibiotics. The best hope was cauterization, burning the wound shut, or cutting away infected flesh. If you were lucky, the infection stopped. If not, you died painfully or lost a limb. You begin to understand why old blacksmiths limp, why they're missing fingers, why their eyes look like they've seen things even fire couldn't burn away. But the body is stubborn. So is yours. After nearly a week, you sit up, teeth gritted, and ask for work. Your father doesn't argue. He simply hands you a small piece of iron and a file. Shape it, he says. So you do, one-handed at first, then awkwardly, with both, the wounded finger bound in thick cloth. It hurts, but you don't care. You're back in the rhythm. Your healing becomes a kind of rebirth. You work slower, smarter. You learn to shift your grip to let your tools do the work instead of brute force. You begin asking questions about angles, techniques, mixtures of metals. Your father answers in nods or short phrases. Too hot. Cool it slower. Add charcoal next time. You start keeping a little ledger. Just scratch marks at first, then symbols you invent to track the outcomes. You're not just working now, you're studying. Then comes the day when you return to the forge alone. Your father's gone, off to barter for more coal or meet with the reeve, and you stand there, hands on your hips, staring into the fire like an equal. It's yours for the moment. Your space, your tools. You feed the flame and it responds, crackling with anticipation. You choose a piece of iron from the pile still rusted from winter moisture, and begin to shape it. That's when something changes. The hammer doesn't feel heavy. The anvil doesn't feel cold. Every strike lands just right. The metal bends without protest. You're not just working it, you're talking to it. You understand each other now. When you quench it, slowly, in oil this time, it sings. You don't know how else to describe it. But the sound is clean. Like music. You smile. A real one. A quirky little truth. Some smiths used to name their tools. Hammers, tongs, even still in bellows. Like sailors naming ships or warriors naming swords. You start doing it, half joking. Your favourite hammer becomes mule because it's stubborn but dependable. The smaller one? Mouse, for its quiet precision. It sounds silly, but when you whisper their names under your breath as you work, you feel less alone. More like you're part of something bigger. Scholars still argue about the place of blacksmithing in the intellectual life of the Middle Ages. Many assume it was brute labour, muscle over mind, but that's far from the truth. Metallurgy required observation, memory, experimentation. Every successful blade was a small scientific triumph. You're beginning to see that now. You're not just smashing hot metal. You're working with heat, timing, chemistry, without ever calling it that. You're building knowledge one blister at a time. The wound on your finger eventually hardens into a scar, a tight pink ridge that never quite bends like it used to. But it's a badge now, a mark of survival. You keep it bandaged for weeks, then proudly unwrap it one morning and plunge your whole hand into the water trough just to prove you can. Business picks up again. Spring comes early this year, and with it, a rush of work. Ploughshares to sharpen, gate hinges to reset, and a sword from a visiting knight who treats you like a servant until he sees the edge you give his blade. Then he tips his head once, stiffly. Respect in the language of men who think they were born above you. That evening, you and your father sit outside the forge, watching the smoke curl against the fading sky. He doesn't say much, just passes you a crust of bread and lets you chew in peace. After a while, he nods toward your hand. That one'll ache in the winter, he says. All your scars will. You nod. You already know it's true. But you also know something else now, something deeper. You are not just surviving the forge, you are becoming it. The Baron's messenger arrives just after sunrise, his horse leathered with sweat and his cloak stiff with mud. You hear him before you see him, the clatter of hooves, the barked orders to the stable boy, the heavy slap of a leather satchel against his side. You're already at the forge, feeding the fire its first taste of coal, when he throws open the door like he owns the place. The Lord requires steel, he says without greeting, and sets a scroll on the workbench like it's a holy relic. Your father opens it with soot-stained fingers, his brow furrows deeper with each line. You inch closer and glance at the drawings, rough but clear. A blade, long, slightly curved, with serrated teeth along one side and a cruel hook on the other. It's not a sword for battle, it's not for defence. This is a weapon for pain. Your stomach knots. The Baron needs 5, the messenger says, and soon there's unrest in the marsh villages. He doesn't explain what that means, but you can guess. Rebellion, maybe. Thieves, or peasants tired of taxes. Make them sturdy, intimidating, and sharp enough to quiet a man in one stroke. Your father says nothing, just nods. When the messenger leaves, silence settles over the forge like ash. You look at your father, waiting for him to protest, to refuse, to say something moral and noble. He doesn't. Instead, he pulls out a sheet of raw steel and begins sketching the curve with a charcoal stick. He pays in silver, he mutters. We need it. You don't argue, because he's right. The forge hasn't seen payment like that in months. The pantry is nearly bare. Coal supplies are low. Your boots have holes in both soles. Silver means repairs, food, fuel, survival. So you help. You shape the steel in silence, each blow ringing louder than it should. The blade takes form slowly, grudgingly. It fights you, too brittle in places, too soft in others. You spend hours filing the hook, perfecting the serrated edge, making sure it looks as vicious as it feels. When you finally quench it, the hiss sounds like a scream. You flinch. The Baron's guards arrive to collect the finished pieces. They inspect each one with cold, efficient movements, nodding grimly. One tests the edge on a leather strap. It slices through like paper. You feel a strange mix of pride and disgust. You've done your job well, maybe too well. That night you clean the forge twice. You scrub the anvil until your knuckles bleed. You burn the cloth used to wrap the blades, and you sit outside under the stars with your hands in your lap, trying not to think about who will bleed because of your work. You tell yourself it's not your fault. You didn't swing the blades, you just made them. Here's a cold historical truth. Blacksmiths in feudal societies were often forced to produce weapons for their lords, especially during times of unrest. Refusal wasn't an option. Even if your soul hated the task, your body had to obey. The forge was not a sanctuary, it was a tool of power, like everything else. But here's a lesser-known and stranger fact. Some smiths left hidden symbols in the blades they forged. Tiny etchings, imperceptible to the untrained eye. Marks of dissent, or prayer, or guilt. You begin doing that too. Just under the hilt, on the inside curve of the blade, you scratch a simple pattern. 3 dots in a line. It means nothing, or maybe everything. It's your secret, your silent refusal. There's still debate among historians whether these hidden marks were messages, or just makers' signatures. Some think they were meant to curse the weapon, or to bless it. Others believe they were merely a way to claim credit. But when you carve yours in, it's not about glory. It's a small act of rebellion. A whisper in the roar of the fire. After the blades leave your hands, something lingers. Not just the physical exhaustion, but a new weight, like iron shackled to your chest. The forge doesn't feel the same. The fire burns hotter. almost angry, or maybe it's just your guilt twisting everything. You work slower for a while, your hands fumble, you snap 2 tongs and melt a hinge by mistake. Your father doesn't say anything, but you catch him watching you more closely, his expression unreadable. And then, a week later, word spreads. 5 marsh villagers were executed. No trial, no last rites, just silence and blood. You hear the details in passing from a merchant who laughs too loudly about it over ale. You excuse yourself and go back to the forge. You don't speak to anyone for the rest of the day. Your dreams turn darker. You're in the forge, but the metal bleeds when you strike it. It screams. The bellows breathe on their own like lungs. You wake up gasping, the taste of ash thick on your tongue. You start sleeping outside near the dog, near the trees, away from the forge if only for a few hours. But time doesn't stop. Orders keep coming. Life pushes forward, dragging you with it. You mend a church gate. You shoe a mule. You forge a ladle for a pregnant woman who insists on paying with a wool blanket stitched by her mother. You accept it, and when she leaves, you cry for the first time in years. One day a travelling knight comes through town, young and cocky. He wants a dagger that looks terrifying, something he can show off at court. You forge it, but with dull edges. He never notices. As he leaves, you whisper the 3-dot mark beneath the pommel, just in case. Your father says nothing about any of this. He sees the marks, he sees the hesitation in your hands, but he says nothing. Maybe because he did the same things once, maybe because he regrets them. That evening, as you stoke the forge for the last time that day, the fire flares high and orange, casting long shadows along the walls. You watch the embers rise like stars and think of the blades out there, shaped by your hands, used for purposes you'll never fully understand. And you make a promise, never to stop working, but to remember what your work can do, because the forge doesn't forget, and neither should you. The forge can melt iron, but nothing burns quite like pride. And pride is exactly what starts the slow, ugly feud with the other apprentice, Edric. He's 2 years older, taller, broader in the chest, with a chin that juts out like he's permanently daring the world to fight him. His father is the blacksmith in the next village over, and when the 2 men collaborate on larger projects, cart frames, drawbridge hinges, church bells, Edric joins in, dragging his smug face and polished hammer into your world like a thundercloud. At first it's small things. He scoffs when he sees the 3-dot mark you etch into your blades, calls it cute. He tests the edge of your work like he's waiting for it to fail. He compliments your hinges with a grin that says the opposite. Surprisingly decent, he mutters, after inspecting your forge-welded chain. That one sticks in your head for days. You tell yourself to ignore it. You tell yourself you're better than the bait, but then he accidentally misplaces your tongs, swaps your quenching oil with brine, and one morning he uses your hammer without asking. Mule, your hammer. The balance is ruined for the whole day. You find him laughing about it with one of the stable hands, and that's it. You grab him by the apron, shove him hard into the wall of the forge, and the shouting begins. He pushes back, tongs fly, a bucket of coal is overturned. The whole shop echoes with the clatter of metal, and a few choice swear words that would make a priest faint. Your father pulls you apart eventually, but not before Edric lands a sharp elbow to your ribs and you see stars. Punishment is swift. You're both banned from the forge for 2 full days. Your father says nothing more than, children shouldn't play with fire if they can't stop burning each other. And then he sends you off. No tools, no work, just time to bang a think. You spend your days aimlessly walking the edge of the village, coal trotting beside you. You watch the fields being tilled, listen to the shepherds calling to their dogs, and feel completely untethered. Without the forge, you're not sure what to do with your hands. They twitch for the weight of a hammer. Even in rest, your muscles ache to move. It's like the forge lives in your bones now, pacing the cage of your body. That's when you find the rock. It's not special, just a long flat stone by the edge of the river. But the surface is perfect for striking. So you set up a little camp. You bring scraps of metal and small tools from your stash beneath the workshop floorboards, things Edric can't sabotage. You build a tiny fire and use river water to quench. It's crude, underpowered, and barely functional, but you make something. A hook. Small, twisted, a little ugly, but solid. Then a latch, then a tiny blade. You don't stop, because spite is a better motivator than hunger. And here's something oddly historical. Feuds between apprentices weren't just common, they were expected. You were meant to prove yourself, to compete for the master's approval, to stand out. Some guilds even encouraged it. Blacksmiths especially were notorious for these rivalries. Pride was part of the job. There's debate about how formal apprenticeships actually were, especially in smaller villages. Some historians argue that the relationships were more familial, fathers passing the craft to sons. Others say apprentices often fought tooth and nail for scraps of recognition. In your case, it's both. Your father is your master, but you still have to earn every nod he gives you. You come back after 2 days of exile with soot under your nails and a small dagger in your pocket. You hand it to your father without a word. He examines the blade in silence, then grunts. "Keep the edge cooler next time, but the spine's solid." It's the closest thing to a compliment you've ever gotten. Edric scowls when he sees you back at the forge. His eye catches the blade in your belt and he squints, but says nothing. You keep your head down and your hands steady. From that point on, a silent war begins. You compete for everything now. Who finishes more nails in a day? Who can file a blade to a mirror sheen? Who the customers ask for by name? You're not even sure when it stopped being about him and started being about you. About proving, not just to others, but to yourself that you're the better smith. And then, one day, Edric crosses the line. You're finishing a ceremonial gate crest for the church. Delicate work, filigree and iron leaves, something that will be hung above the main door for generations. You've worked on it for days, hunched over, fingers blackened and blistered. It's nearly done when you step outside to cool off. 5 minutes, that's all. When you return, one of the leaves has snapped. The weld is broken, clean and deliberate. Not a mistake, sabotage. You feel something boil inside you. This isn't a rivalry anymore. This is war. You don't confront him, not with words. Instead, you forge a new leaf, twice as detailed, and fix the crest before sunrise. You bring it to the church alone, mount it yourself and wait. When the villagers admire it during Sunday Mass, they point and whisper. Someone even says it's the finest ironwork they've seen in years. Edric doesn't show up that day. Here's a fun but obscure blacksmithing custom. In some parts of medieval Europe, apprentices used to sneak a small imperfection into their rival's work. Not to ruin it, just to embarrass them. A tiny misshapen scroll, a scratch on the blade. It was a secret game of one-upmanship. You don't play that game anymore. You don't have time for games. You're here to master the fire, not dance around it. That night you dream of a forge with no walls, just an anvil under the stars and flames that never die. You strike the iron and it shapes itself perfectly with every blow. When you wake, your pillow's damp with sweat, your hands curled into fists. But you smile. You're winning! The journal appears on a shelf where nothing should be. You're cleaning the back of the shop, moving old crates of scrap and worn-out bellows, when you spot it, tucked behind a rusted wheel rim and a coil of chain so old it's fused together like melted licorice. The journal is leather-bound, stiff with age, the cover stained with oil and soot. There's no name on the front, just a faint engraving of a hammer crossed with a feather. You open it and immediately feel like you shouldn't be. The handwriting is precise, slanted and elegant. Not your father's, not anyone you know. The pages are dense with notes, diagrams, metal mixtures, forging temperatures and strange codes that at first seem like gibberish. But as you flip through, it starts to make a weird sort of sense. This isn't just a blacksmith's logbook. This is something deeper. A masterwork. One section details a forgotten quenching technique using vinegar and clay. Another explains how to forge a blade so fine it bends without breaking. Something you've never seen. Not even in the hands of knights. There are symbols for types of steel that don't match anything your father's ever taught you. And notes about folding iron to trap the heat in its spine. Whatever this is, it was written by someone far beyond your skill. Maybe even beyond your father's. You hide it, of course. Wrap it in cloth and stash it beneath a floorboard in your corner of the forge. You don't even tell Cole. This is yours now. Your secret. Your tool. And you start studying it the way monks study scripture. Every night by candlelight, tracing diagrams with your fingertip, whispering the formulas under your breath. One night you try one. It's a simple recipe, or at least it looks simple. A new alloy mixture for hinges meant to resist rust. You follow the steps exactly, heat the metals in the ratio described, and when you pour the blend into a mould, it glows a brilliant greenish gold for a moment before fading. You test the cooled piece the next morning. Strong, stronger than anything you've made before. When you show your father, he raises an eyebrow and grunts. You get lucky. And you just smile. There's an old myth that blacksmiths were magicians in disguise, that their knowledge of metal and fire gave them powers others feared. The church discouraged this thinking, but it never went away. You can feel it now. With the journal in your hands, you're learning faster than ever. Your welds are cleaner, your blades sharper. You start modifying old tools based on the diagrams, grinding one hammerhead into a curved crescent, filing notches into your tongs for better grip. Your work is evolving. A quirky detail, some smiths in the 13th and 14th centuries used coded books just like this. They passed them down in secret, sometimes even hiding them in false walls or beneath floorboards. Many were lost or destroyed, especially during times of war or religious panic. Some say these books contained early science, alchemy, metallurgy, and ideas that would eventually lead to chemistry. Others think they were just old men scribbling down hunches. You think this one is something in between. But now comes the real test. You decide to forge a blade from the journal. A proper one, not a toy dagger or a ceremonial crest. A real weapon. You wait until your father is away at market, and then you start. You follow the temperature range exactly, using the mixture noted under a page labelled Echo Steel. You hammer with slow, deliberate strikes, folding the metal back on itself again and again. The journal says 40 times. You do 42 just to be safe. You coat the blade in clay. Let it bake in the fire until it glows sunset orange, and then hold your breath and quench it in vinegar mixed with ash. The forge hisses like it's alive. The steam fogs up the entire shop. When it clears, you pull the blade free. It's perfect. The spine is stiff, the edge fine. You polish it until your reflection stares back, not as a boy, but as something more. You run your finger down the edge and it shaves your skin like silk. You sheathe it in leather and tuck it away. You don't tell anyone about it. Not yet. But something's changed in you. When Edric sees your latest hinges, intricate with scrollwork curling like ivy, his mouth twitches. Your father helping you with those now? He asks. You shrug. Just watching the fire more closely. He doesn't respond. Just walks away with that slow, calculating step you've come to know too well. Then late one night you catch him snooping near your corner of the forge. You don't confront him. Not directly. You wait until morning, then move the journal again, this time into a small nook carved behind the chimney bricks, wrapped in oiled cloth and tucked so deep even you have to wiggle your arm to reach it. Let him look. He won't find it. That night, you light a candle and flip to the final page you haven't read yet. It's titled, For the One Who Outlives the Fire. The text is cryptic. Something about knowing the weight of creation and destruction, about forging not just metal but legacy, about choosing what you make and why. You sit with that for a long time, because now you've made a weapon, a flawless one, and you have no idea what it's for. There's an old debate about how much agency blacksmiths had in medieval times. Did they get to choose what they made, or were they merely tools of their patrons? You're living that question now. The Baron could ask for more of those torture hooks at any moment. A knight could commission a sword meant to cut down farmers. And you? You've got the knowledge now to make something truly devastating, or something truly beautiful. The journal hasn't given you answers. It's given you the choice, and that might be more dangerous than anything you've ever forged. You'd think after forging a blade sharp enough to slice air in half, you'd get some recognition. Maybe even a little respect. But here's the truth. In the world of medieval blacksmithing, no matter how skilled you become, there's always a wall between you and power. And that wall has a very polished door with a very polished brass plaque. Guild members only. The Blacksmiths Guild is a fortress of tradition and regulation. It sets the rules, decides who's a real master, and more importantly, controls who gets the lucrative contracts from nobles, towns, and the church. Without guild approval, you're just another village smith sweating over horseshoes and cookware. No matter how many secret journals you've deciphered, or how many triple-folded blades you've quietly mastered. And in your case, it's worse. You're not even in a city where the guild has a chapter. You're trying to climb a ladder that doesn't have rungs where you stand. Still, word of your work travels. That dagger you made, the one from the journal, caught the attention of a visiting steward. He called it exquisite, which you had to look up later in a monk's glossarium, just to be sure it wasn't an insult. Next thing you know, you're invited to a showing in the nearest town, 3 days' ride east. It's not exactly a guild meeting, but it's close. A gathering of blacksmiths, apprentices, and merchants to display their best wares and perhaps catch the eye of someone important. You pack light. The blade, of course. A few smaller pieces, a lock with a hidden release mechanism, a set of decorative nails, and a polished clasp for a ceremonial robe. Your father gives you a pouch of coins, heavy with everything you've saved for 2 winters. Try not to come back a fool, he says, which in his language means good luck. The road is long and cold, the cart rickety, the mule moody. You travel with Cole curled at your feet, his fur thick with burrs, and your mind looping over everything that could go wrong. What if they laugh at you? What if they take your designs and leave you behind? What if Edric somehow shows up and trips you into a well? But when you arrive, the town is buzzing. Tents line the main square. Forge fires flicker in open stalls, and the smell, sweet, oily, metallic, is somehow comforting. You set up your tiny booth near a retired smith who's now selling cast-iron cookware with a side of unsolicited wisdom. He eyes your blade and chuckles. Pretty. But pretty doesn't hold up in war. You say nothing. You didn't come here to argue. The crowd drifts through slowly. A noblewoman pauses at your clasp, lifting it with fingers so pale they look like snow. A knight in green tilts your blade to catch the light, then grunts and walks away. You catch scraps of conversation. Too thin, clever hinge, foreign technique, but no one stops long enough to matter. You feel your excitement wilt like cabbage left in the sun. Then the guildmen arrive, 4 of them robed like magistrates with hands. With hands too clean to have ever gripped tongs. They scan the booths, occasionally muttering approvals or raising eyebrows. When they reach yours, they pause. One of them picks up the dagger and inspects the edge. Yours? He asks. You nod. Where'd you learn the grind? Trial and error, you lie. The journal stays in your mind like a shadow behind the forge wall. They exchange glances. One of them snorts. Not guild standard. Edge is too fine. Wouldn't hold in the field. Another shrugs. But the polish is good. Filework's tight. Not bad for a village smith. They move on, and just like that your hopes flatten like an overheated blade. Here's a historical reality. Guilds were often more about politics than craftsmanship. To join, you needed sponsorship, money, and, let's be honest, connections. Talent helped, sure, but only after you greased the right palms and pledged fealty to men who probably couldn't forge a nail without spraining something. Outsiders rarely got in, especially those without a master's signature or a noble's backing. That evening at the tavern near the square, you overhear 2 journeymen discussing the kid with the wild blade. One laughs. Not guild, he says. Doesn't count. The other shrugs. But he's got the hands. You stare into your mug and chew the inside of your cheek until it bleeds. Still, you don't leave empty-handed. A cloth merchant commissions a set of decorative buckles. A falconer offers trade for a set of jesses, small rings for a bird's legs. And one old smith, drunk but sharp like it, slips you a folded note. The best aren't always in the guild. Keep swinging, no name, just a thumbprint in black grease. You ride home quieter than you left. The forge greets you like it always does, indifferent and warm. You unpack your tools, hang the blade on its hook and feed the fire with last year's birch. Your father doesn't ask how it went, just nods once and hands you a shovel. The coal needs turning. That night you pull the journal from its hiding place and turn to a page you hadn't noticed before, one with a symbol beside it, a hammer and quill crossed over an anvil. The title reads, Recognition is forged, not granted. The technique on the page is unlike anything you've seen, layered steel with a wave pattern running down the blade. Pattern welding, therefore, the note says. Strength, beauty, memory, the iron remembers every fold. It'll take weeks to learn, months to master, but you smile anyway, because they may have shut you out, but they haven't stopped you. Not even close. War doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles in like a bad smell, faint at first, then overwhelming. It starts with whispers at the market, raiders to the north, villages burned, a baron's cousin murdered on the road. Then come the messengers, pounding hooves and frantic eyes. By the time the soldiers march through your village, you already know. You've seen too many men sharpening old swords and too many fathers hugging their sons too tightly at dusk. Something's about to break. And when it does, your forge becomes the heartbeat of it all. Suddenly you're not making hinges or lock plates. You're making weapons. Again, spearheads, arrow tips, blades for men who don't know which end of a sword to hold. The Baron's levy is gathering. They need arms, armour, nails, spikes, horseshoes, everything. And fast! Your father calls it a firestorm of work. You call it a storm of fear. Your day's stretched to 20 hours. Sleep becomes optional. The anvil rings before the sun and keeps singing well after the stars appear. Your hands swell, wrists throb, muscles knot so tightly you can't grip a cup without shaking. Cole lies curled under the workbench, occasionally looking up at you like he's waiting for you to collapse. You feel close to it. The soldiers come and go like shadows wrapped in chainmail. Some are just boys, barely old enough to grow beards, desperate to look brave. They watch you work, wide-eyed, as if the fire might whisper secrets to them. One asks if you've ever fought in a battle. You shake your head. I make the weapons, you say. I don't use them. He laughs nervously and says, maybe you should... You don't laugh back. A historical fact to hammer into place. During periods of war, blacksmiths were more valuable than archers. You don't shoot the arrows, you make the arrowheads. You don't ride the horses, you shoe them. You don't die on the battlefield, but without you everyone else might. Some smiths were even forced to travel with the army, maintaining weapons and armour on the go, working with mobile forges strapped to ox-drawn carts. So you're not surprised when the Baron's steward visits. He's dressed in polished leather, more gold thread than function, and he stands with his hands behind his back like he's measuring the forge for replacement. He surveys your work and nods. His lordship requires your service, and he says, you'll accompany the levy for field repairs. Payment will be deferred. You know what that means. No pay unless you survive. Your father stands beside you, silent. When the steward leaves, he grunts and says, start packing. And just like that, you're drafted. You fill a cart with tools, hammers, tongs, sharpening stones, oil, scrap iron, rivets, nails. You bring the pattern-welded blade wrapped in cloth, hidden beneath other blades. You're not sure why, just a feeling. Your father doesn't come. He's too old now. He watches you go with the same expression he's worn your whole life, somewhere between a frown and fatigue. You wonder if he remembers his first Forgefield march. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Cole climbs onto the cart like it's his duty. You let him come. The army is a chaotic beast. You join at the rear, behind rows of carts and horses, and confused farmers wearing mismatched armour. The smell is sweat, old leather, and unwashed fear. You ride beside the wheelwright who chews bark and mutters to himself about axle stress. He's the closest thing you have to a friend. Your forge is a firepot strapped to your cart bed. Small, temperamental, but hot enough. You patch armour, sharpen swords, rework broken spear tips. You work as the army marches, as it camps, even while the wind howls through the trees. There's no schedule, just the next emergency, and the blades. They keep breaking. Badly made, rusted from neglect, or simply not up to the strain of real combat. You replace them as fast as you can. Sometimes you have to fight for materials. Give me iron, you shout, or give me bodies with nothing to hold. One night, you watch your first real battle, from a hill just behind the front. It's less heroic than you imagined. Men fall quickly. Screams fill the air like songbirds at dawn. The clang of blades is drowned out by horses screaming and mud sucking at boots. You don't move. You can't. You just sit, eyes wide, gripping your hammer like it might do something to stop the dying. Afterward, they bring the wounded back in heaps. You don't help with the healing. You're too busy pulling armour plates off men who won't need them anymore. You feel sick, but your hands don't stop. They can't. A curious historical aside, blacksmiths on the field often worked beside the dead. Tools were scarce. If someone fell in good gear, it was salvaged, cleaned, repaired, reissued. The war didn't care where the metal came from, only that it worked. You start seeing the same faces every day. The grim sergeant with a dented helmet you patched 3 times. The knight who lost 2 fingers and asked you to reshape his grip. The boy with the quiet eyes who always says thank you. These men depend on you now more than they know. Then one night the firepot gives out. It cracks under pressure. Too much heat, too much stress. You panic. Without it you can't work. But then you remember the journal, the design for an emergency forge. You rebuild it in the dark using old shields for the wind guard, a broken sword for a bellows crank. It works. Barely. And you write it down, your own design next to the ones you've studied for months. because now you're not just learning from the journal, you're adding to it. You're not an apprentice anymore. A scholar once asked, at what point does a blacksmith become a master? When his mentor says so? When the guild stamps his name? Or when his work shapes the outcome of battle? You don't have the answer. But standing here, smoke in your lungs, ash in your hair, you feel something settle in your chest. Not pride, responsibility, because you're not just forging iron anymore, you're forging survival. You always thought armour would be elegant, gleaming steel that fit the body like a second skin, smooth and shining, like those statues of knights you once saw in the cathedral. But that's not how it works out here. Out here it's dented and muddy, buckled in places, patched with rivets that don't match. Some of it isn't even iron. You see boiled leather, bits of chainmail tied on with rope, and a man who's literally strapped a cooking pot to his shoulder like it's going to stop a crossbow bolt. Your job is to make sense of it, to turn this chaos of metal and desperation into something that might save a life. It starts with chainmail, simple enough. You're handed a sack of rusted rings and a torn hauberk, and someone says, fix it. That's it. No measurements, no names, just fix it. You spend 2 hours matching ring size and hammering new links closed. The soldier who takes it doesn't even say thanks. He just tugs it over his head and jogs off toward the front like he's wearing magic. Then come the plate requests. At first it's just greaves, shin guards. Easy enough, a few bends, a rivet or two, some leather strapping. Then someone brings you a breastplate, split clean across the left pectoral. He says it was an axe. You stare at the jagged edge for a long time. Can't fix this, you say. Need to start over. He frowns. Can you make it stronger this time? You want to tell him there's no such thing as invincible armour, that iron is iron, and even the best plate has weak spots, but instead you nod. I'll do what I can, and you do. You start making your own designs, based on the journal, yes, but also on what you've seen firsthand. You reinforce the lower ribs with overlapping scales. You shape pauldrons with a slight outward angle to deflect downward strikes. You replace buckles with toggles, faster to fasten when your hands are bloody. Some soldiers come back just to find you. You the one who made this? They ask, tapping the armour. Took a hit and didn't break a rib. You nod. They smile. One even tosses you a silver coin. You keep it in your boot, you don't know why. Here's a fact to plate your curiosity. Most medieval armour wasn't made by a single smith. It was a collaboration. Plates by one, chain by another, leather by a third. But in wartime, especially in rough conditions like this, one smith might do it all. You've become that smith. A one-man assembly line of war protection. It's exhausting, but you're getting good at it. Fast too. And here's a bizarre little historical detail. In some places, knights would sleep in partial armour not for safety, but because they liked how it felt. Said it made them feel powerful. You see it now, men walking around with one pauldron still strapped on, refusing to take off their greaves during meals. Armour becomes part of them. Maybe they believe if they keep it close the blade won't find a gap. You test every piece before you send it out. Not on a dummy, on yourself. You strap on the greaves, take a stick to the knee, see if it holds. You bend, squat, twist. You hammer on the breastplate, listening for weak spots. One time you miss and catch your own thigh. The bruise blooms like a purple rose for a week. You study other smiths' work too. When bodies come back, you inspect the damage. Not out of morbid curiosity, out of necessity. Where did the strike land? Where did the armour fail? What could have saved them? It haunts you, sure, but it teaches you more than any guild ever did. Then one evening the camp is buzzing. A duel is about to take place, between a knight of your barons and a captured noble from the enemy side. Not a battle, but a formal fight. Trial by steel, someone calls it. You're summoned to check the armour. The baron's knight is tall, vain and unpleasant. He wants his breastplate polished to a mirror. You do it, knowing full well the polish won't deflect a spear. The enemy knight, surprisingly young, no more than 20, has armour that's mismatched but well cared for. He sees you adjusting his gauntlet and nods once. You made this, he asks. You don't answer. Neutrality matters. You just secure the strap. The duel is brutal, loud, fast, mud flies, blades spark. You watch both armours take hit after hit, steel grating on steel. The baron's knight gets lucky, disarms his opponent with a glancing blow and knocks him cold with the pommel. The crowd roars. The enemy knight lies crumpled in the dirt. Later you sneak a look at his breastplate. It held. The strike caught him on the helmet rim, a weak point. You pick up the dented helm and run your thumb along the crack. Could have fixed that, you whisper. And now here's a question historians debate. Was armour really as effective as legends claim? Some say yes, it turned peasants into tanks. Others argue most armour just made dying slower. You've seen both. You've seen a blade bounce off a pauldron. You've seen a spear pierce a breastplate like paper. No armour is perfect. But sometimes it buys a man 5 more seconds. That's enough. The pattern-welded blade remains untouched in your cart. You almost bring it to the duel. Almost. But you decide it isn't ready. Not yet. It's not for sport. It's not for show. It's for something that matters. You don't know what that is yet. But you'll know when the moment comes. You start keeping a record of your own. A little leather book tucked beside the journal. Diagrams, designs, notes on soldiers' feedback. You don't think of it as copying the journal anymore. You're continuing it, expanding it, making it yours. You sketch a new helmet design. Rounded sides, reinforced brow, padded interior. You call it crow's skull. You sketch a chest plate with a narrow ridge down the centre to deflect strikes sideways. You call it breaker. You don't tell anyone, but the names feel right. Your armour is worn now by 50 men across the camp. You still burn yourself, you still cut your fingers, but when those men walk into battle with your work on their backs, you feel something stir. It's not pride. Not exactly, it's purpose. You're not just building protection, you're building the line between life and death. It begins with a cough. Not yours, though you're no stranger to the rasp that follows a day spent breathing forge smoke. No, this cough comes from the cook's boy, pale, thin, constantly wiping. His nose with his sleeve. He hunches over a bucket behind the mess tent, and no one pays attention at first. Kids get sick, camps are filthy, it happens. Then the stable master doesn't show up one morning. His apprentices say he had a fever the night before, hot enough to burn through his blankets. By midday he's gone. Dead. Just like that. And now people start to whisper. The word comes quietly like a confession carried by the wind. Plague. You don't believe it at first. Well, you try not to. But when a captain collapses in his saddle and 2 squires start vomiting behind the supply wagons, the fear settles in. You've seen what war does to a camp. Blood, mud, rot. But this is different. This comes without warning. Without weapons. No clash of steel. No trumpet call. Just fever, boils, and the sound of someone gasping for breath in the night. You retreat to your forge, because it's the only place that still makes sense. Fire kills things. You've always believed that. You stoke the flames hotter than usual, let the smoke swirl around your station like a shield. You wear a damp cloth over your face soaked in vinegar, like the old alchemists used to do. Your father once told you that smoke can chase away spirits. You're counting on it to chase away death. But you can't escape it entirely. One of your regulars, the boy with the soft voice and mismatched greaves, comes to you shivering. He doesn't want new armour. He wants a sharpened knife. To cut the swelling, he says. You hand it to him without a word. He nods, stumbles off. He doesn't come back. The camp begins to unravel. Soldiers try to flee only to be dragged back or killed for desertion. The priests walk among the sick with incense and prayers, but their hands shake. The commanders argue over moving the entire camp or holding ground. Some say it's a punishment from God. Others blame a poisoned well. Everyone's looking for something to blame. Anything but the simple, awful truth that none of them can stop it. A harsh historical fact, plague was the great equalizer of the Middle Ages. Nobles and peasants, soldiers and smiths, it didn't care. It moved silently, cruelly, and it always outran reason. Some outbreaks wiped out half of entire armies without a single battle. Camps like yours, crowded and unsanitary, were perfect breeding grounds. Cold doesn't leave your side now. He curls near your feet at night, head on your boots, ears twitching at every cough in the distance. You share your bread with him, pour your drinking water into a dented bowl. He's the only soul you trust not to infect you. You start forging nails, not armour, not weapons, nails, because the gravediggers run out of them. Too many coffins, too fast. You hammer iron into coffin spikes until your hands go numb. The fire keeps roaring, but the forge feels cold. Everything does. You stop counting how many you've made after 300. Then one night you fall ill. It hits like a hammer to the chest. Sweats, chills, a burn in the throat. You try to tell yourself it's just exhaustion. Maybe smoke in your lungs, but your legs buckle on the way to the water trough and suddenly you're face down in the dirt, unable to stand. They carry you to a quarantine tent, if you can call it that. It's just a cluster of stained cloth and dying men. The air is thick with the smell of infection. You lie on a cot shaking so hard your teeth clatter like coins. You see hallucinations, flames with faces, the anvil laughing, your father hammering on your chest to wake you up. You think you're dying, but somehow you don't. After 3 days of delirium, your fever breaks. You're weak, barely able to sit up, but you're alive. A priest calls it a miracle. A healer says you're blessed with strong blood. You don't know what saved you. Maybe the smoke really did keep the worst at bay. Maybe the vinegar helped. Or maybe you were just too damn stubborn to let go. Whatever the reason, you recover, and you return to the forge. Not immediately. You limp at first. Your strength comes back in fits, but you make it. You stand in front of the fire, and it welcomes you, the heat wrapping around your ribs like an old friend. Your hammer feels strange in your hand, heavier than you remember. But it swings. And now, the survivors come to you not just as a blacksmith, but as something more. A symbol, maybe. You lived. The forge lived. People need something to believe in, and for now, you're it. A quirky detail. In some plague-stricken areas, blacksmiths were thought to be immune to disease. Something about the smoke, the heat, the iron. Of course, many still died, but myths don't care about facts. They care about hope. You're not immune, you know that. But you're standing, and standing means forging. So you start again. You build a new handle for a hammer whose owner is now buried under a pine cross. You weld shut a helmet that's been through both sword and sickness. You craft a small iron cross for a child's grave, even though no one asked you to. You leave it there quietly at dawn. There's a debate among scholars. How did people find the strength to keep rebuilding after plague tore through their lives? Some say it was faith. Others say desperation. But you know the truth is simpler. The fire was still hot, the iron was still there, and the world doesn't stop needing to be held together, especially when everything's falling apart. So you keep swinging, even if the sound of coughing still echoes in your ears. Even if the nails you forge go into coffins more than carts. Even if you know it could return at any time, because the forge still lives, and as long as the forge lives, so do you. It starts with your sister at the bellows. You come back from the latrine and there she is, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, foot planted on the bellow board like she owns the forge. The fire flares obediently under her rhythm, and for a moment you just stand there stunned. She doesn't look at you, doesn't even ask, just says, "You were gone." The fire was dying. You're not sure how she got here. Last you heard she was staying with an aunt in the next village, sewing linens and dodging marriage proposals, but now she's here, inside your world of smoke and iron and things you'd never imagined she'd want any part of. Your first instinct is to shoo her out. This is dangerous, hot, and no place for someone who's never swung a hammer. But before you can say anything, she tosses a scrap of coal into the brazier with practiced aim and says, "You gonna stare, or are we making something?" So you make something. Together. At first it's small. Nails, hooks, a broken clasp for a saddlebag. She watches every move with a furrowed brow and lips pressed into a straight line of concentration. Her hands aren't soft like you remember. They're rough from sewing, calloused at the fingertips. Still, you flinch every time she gets too close to the forge, instinctively reaching to pull her away. "Stop it," she mutters. "I'm not made of wax." Turns out she's a quick study, AAE. She understands angles, leverage, and the patience required to work with iron. Where you muscle your way through a stubborn piece, she listens to the metal, adjusts her grip, changes the strike. Her hammering is softer but more precise. Within a week, she's shaping rings more cleanly than you did your first year. Within 2, she's spotting when a blade's been over-tempered just by the shine. It's infuriating and impressive. Your father doesn't say much when he sees her at the forge. He just lifts one eyebrow, shrugs, and keeps eating. Maybe he's too old to care about propriety anymore. Or maybe he knows something you don't. She says he was the one who sent for her after the fever broke. Said you needed help. Said she had the hands for it. You don't argue. But the village argues plenty. The whispers begin almost immediately. The girl at the forge? Isn't that cursed? What man's going to marry her if she's covered in soot? Some of the boys from the mill laugh when they pass the shop and see her swinging a hammer. One of them calls her coal wife, like it's an insult. She doesn't flinch, just keeps working. Later that night, She sharpens her own blade to such a fine edge that you nick your finger just looking at it. Here's a curious historical truth. While rare, women did work as blacksmiths during the Middle Ages, especially during war, famine, or plague, when men were scarce and work still needed doing. In some towns, a woman could inherit her husband's forge and operate it under her own name. Still, most were unofficial, working in the shadows, often without credit. That's what your sister is becoming, an unofficial master of flame. You notice her techniques start to evolve. She adds curves to horseshoes, making them grip better on slick roads. She reforges hinges with decorative curls, because iron can be beautiful too, she says. You'd never thought of it that way. You start copying her designs, then pretending they were your idea. She knows, she doesn't call you out. But she does smirk. A quirky reality. Some villages held the belief that a woman working iron could spoil it, sour the metal or dull the blade. It was superstition, born of fear and tradition, but it had teeth. You hear a priest mutter it one day after seeing her stoke the fire. That night you find a small iron charm left on the anvil, a bent nail twisted into a loop. Protection, apparently. You toss it into the coals. Then one day the reeve shows up, and he's not smiling. He claims there have been complaints that some villagers are concerned about a woman handling weapons, especially with tension still high after the last battle. They say it's unnatural, he says. They say it invites ruin. Your father doesn't even look up from his stool. They say a lot of things, he mutters. They said I wouldn't live past the last winter. The reeve frowns, then turns to you. Keep her out of sight, he says, or the guild will hear of it. You want to laugh. The guild already pretends you don't exist, but your sister nods politely, says nothing, then goes right back to shaping a rivet. The reeve leaves unsatisfied. That night she forges something new, a pendant. Not for a sword, not for armour, just a piece of curved iron, hammered thin and etched with stars. She hangs it from a leather cord and gives it to you without explanation. For luck, she says. You don't ask why, you just wear it. Here's a scholarly debate that still clinks around today. Did women in medieval trades hide their work or flaunt it? Some evidence suggests they passed off their goods under male names to stay safe. Others believe they used coded markings, like your 3 dots, to claim silent ownership. You start wondering how many old blades out there were forged by hands like hers, forgotten but still strong. Together you begin to share the forge as equals. She works mornings, you take nights, sometimes you overlap, sometimes you bicker. But when you both strike the anvil at the same time, the sound rings deeper, sharper, like the forge knows you're in sync. People still whisper, but fewer every day, because the truth is, her work is good, damn good. And the village, superstitions and all, still needs its iron, especially when a new shadow appears on the horizon, a black standard waving above unfamiliar soldiers. More war is coming, and this time you won't face it alone. It begins with the smell, smoke but wrong, not the smoky sweetness of your forge, not the sharp scent of burning coal or the tang of hot iron. This is darker, thicker, oilier. You smell it before you even open your eyes. Then comes the shouting, loud scattered, not the routine bustle of carts or a drunkard's late-night nonsense. Panic, running, metal clanging that's not coming from your shop. You sit up in the forge loft and see the glow through the cracks in the shutters. It's not dawn, it's fire. You bolt upright and nearly fall trying to grab your boots. Your sister is already awake, eyes wide, clutching her hammer like a club. Something's wrong, she says, voice low and tight. You don't answer. You already know. You throw open the door and your heart turns to molten lead. The forge is on fire, not yours yet, but the thatch-roofed shop beside you is engulfed. Flames leap along the eaves like dancers, licking hungrily at the walls, rending across the alley, like it's been waiting for this exact moment. Someone screams, a voice you know, maybe the cooper's wife. You run barefoot toward the bucket line forming along the edge of the square, grabbing the first empty you see and plunging into the chaos. And that's when you realise this isn't an accident. Too many fires, too far apart. The flames jump unnaturally. And then you hear it, a crash from behind your forge. You turn and see 2 shapes cloaked in dark rags, one carrying a torch, the other something heavier. They vanish around the corner before you can even shout. You drop the bucket, sprint, but you're too late. The back wall is already in flames. You don't remember making the decision to go inside, but suddenly you're in the forge, breathing smoke, shouting your sister's name. She's dragging tools into the courtyard, coughing but focused. "The journal!" she yells. You freeze. You know exactly where it is, tucked behind the brick of the chimney, wrapped in oiled cloth. You rush in, heart hammering louder than your boots on the stone. The smoke is thicker now, clawing at your throat. You rip the brick loose, grab the journal, and shove it under your shirt. When you stumble out into the open air, everything behind you glows orange, red, black, gone. The roof collapses 10 minutes later. Your forge, the shop your father built by hand, the place where you learned to hold a hammer before you could spell your own name, crashes in on itself in a storm of sparks and embers. The anvil, your anvil, rings one final time as a beam falls across it with a sound like the world exhaling. You don't speak, you don't cry, you just sit beside your sister, watching the fire consume everything you've ever made. A cold historical truth. Arson was common in medieval villages, often used to settle feuds or drive out unwanted tradespeople. In towns with outstanding fire patrols, it took only minutes for flames to devour entire streets. And justice rare, especially when no one wants to name the culprit. The next morning, what's left is nothing but scorched earth and a half-melted horseshoe sticking out of the ash. The villagers come to see the wreckage, clucking their tongues, offering dry, useless condolences. You hear the whispers again. Serves them right. That girl never belonged in a forge. Fire takes what it doesn't want. But some just look sad. The miller's boy brings you a wrapped bundle, your tools, what he could salvage from the coals. A few are warped, blackened, but some are still strong. You squeeze his arm in thanks. Your father appears before noon, somehow older than ever. He doesn't ask what happened. He doesn't need to. He just surveys the destruction, steps onto the edge of the soot-blackened threshold and says, "So." "So," you echo. That night you sleep outside, curled under a wool blanket beside your sister and Cole. The journal stays close, wrapped in cloth, pressed to your chest like armour. You reread the last few pages by firelight. Entries about loss, rebuilding, and a forge made from scrap and spite. It starts there. The next day you build a frame. It's pitiful at first, just 4 upright beams and a lean-to roof covered in stitched canvas. But it's something. You drag the anvil, scarred but intact, onto a new stone base. You hammer a signpost into the ground that simply reads Forge. No fancy name, no apology, just a statement of fact. You scavenge what you can, you trade repaired tools for spare wood. The village children bring you nails, scraps of metal, even a hinge they found half melted. You offer each one a token in return, a bent spoon, a whistle, a horseshoe charm. They begin to call it the Ash Forge. Your sister insists on painting a crescent moon on the back wall. "Because we work after the sun dies," she says. You don't argue. It's fitting. One night you catch Edric lurking near the ruined edge of the old shop. He doesn't speak. Doesn't need to. The smirk on his face tells you everything. You know he knows, but there's no proof. Just smoke and suspicion. He's joined the guild now, of course, all nice and tidy. You watch him disappear into the dark, and for a moment your hand goes to the hilt of the pattern-welded blade. But you let him go, because revenge won't rebuild a forge. You will. A strange historical curiosity. Some smiths believed that forges rebuilt after fire made stronger metal. Something about the ash purifying the ground, or the gods testing the iron spirit of the place. You don't know if it's true, but when you hammer your first new blade, rough, jagged, ugly, you feel it. The rhythm returns, the fire answers, and the village slowly begins to return too. A farmer needs a spade reforged, a weaver needs a new loom rod. Even the reeve, tight-lipped and awkward, drops off a broken lock and mumbles, "My wife asked." You take the work. You take all the work. You're broke, bruised, blackened and burned out. But you are still the blacksmith. And your fire is not done. Not yet. You start again with borrowed tools and a blistered spine. The forge is nothing like it was. No walls, no chimney, no carved oak sign over the entrance. But it breathes. Just barely. Like a wounded beast that hasn't decided whether to die or fight back. The canvas roof leaks. The wind cuts through the gaps between the scrapwood planks. And every night, the coals burn just long enough to make you remember what warmth used to feel like. You don't complain. Not once, because complaining means you expect comfort. And comfort's for people who still have fingernails that aren't rimmed in soot and lungs that don't rattle when they laugh. You have a forge that shouldn't work, but it does. A hammer handle worn smooth from 100 fists before yours, a dog who still curls under the bench like it's the palace floor, and your sister, who swings a hammer like a woman trying to prove something to a world that won't listen. You still have everything you need. Well, almost everything. Coal's running low, the stack you saved is nearly gone, and the stuff you can get from the miller's cousin burns fast and dirty. It spits sparks like an angry drunk and leaves clinkers thick enough to crack your crucible. One day your sister lights the morning fire, and the flame chokes halfway through heating the billet. "This isn't going to last," she mutters, shaking ash from her sleeve. You don't answer. You're too busy running numbers in your head. Not enough coal, not enough iron, not enough coin. The town's poor now too. War and plague took the shine off everyone's shoes. Most folks trade goods instead of currency. One man gives you a sack of barley for sharpening his shears. Another brings you 2 live chickens in exchange for a horseshoe set. You take everything. Nothing goes to waste. You make a stew from the bones and save the feathers for pillow stuffing. If you could forge a spoon out of regret, you'd be rich. Still, work trickles in. Slow, but steady. You're rebuilding your reputation one hinge at a time. One cold afternoon, a boy with crooked teeth and a bruised forehead brings you a broken lock. "Thief got in," he says, eyes on the ground. You fix the lock and add a tiny catch he'll never notice, a hidden notch that makes it harder to pick. You don't charge him, just nod and say, "Don't tell anyone." Your sister, meanwhile, is making things beautiful. You don't know how it happened, but her work has started to sing. Hooks that curl into spirals like seashells, brackets shaped like owl wings, hinges that look like flower stems, except they actually work. She's started experimenting with bronze now, blending it with scrap copper, etching designs along the edges. You used to laugh at decorative metalwork. Now you watch her file a delicate swirl into the back of a spoon and feel a strange flicker of envy. Not because you're better, but because she's not afraid to make something pretty in a world that's been so ugly. There's a historical tidbit for you. In times of hardship, aesthetics often made a quiet return before prosperity did. Beauty wasn't just a luxury, it was rebellion. A curled hook on a battered door was a way of saying, "We're still here." You begin to understand why churches commissioned gargoyles during plagues, why blacksmiths shaped roses into hinges during famines. Beauty survives, so you start doing it too. You carve little stars into the backs of belt buckles, you add grooves to a sword hilt that look like lightning bolts. You make a set of gate hinges that, when closed, form the silhouette of a tree. The village doesn't comment on it, not directly, but the orders increase, slowly, subtly. Someone even drops off a coin pouch. Actual coin, silver no less. You try not to get your hopes up. The next day the merchant returns. He's well dressed, boots polished, sleeves trimmed with red wool. He wants a new set of door hardware for his manor. With flair, he says, but not too much. He looks at your sister when he says it, then at you, then back again. "You're the smith, though?" he asks, clearly addressing you. Your sister doesn't flinch, she just shrugs. "He makes the hinges. I make sure they don't squeak." The merchant blinks. "Fair enough." He places a second pouch on the table. "More if it's done by next full moon." After he leaves, you both sit there for a long time, staring at the silver. You don't say anything, you don't need to. You're rebuilding from ash, yes, but now you're also building forward. Here's a strange little historic argument. Some scholars believe that after major disasters, fires, plagues, wars, the survivors were stronger, more adaptable, even more innovative. Others say trauma stunted invention for generations. You lean toward the former, because every piece you make now is smarter. You're using less fuel, working faster, shaping better with fewer tools. You've learned more in the year of hardship than you did in 5 years of comfort. One night you reopen the journal. You've barely touched it since the fire, fearing what you might have lost. But the page is held. The writing is smudged in places, edges curled, but it's intact. You flip to the back and start adding your own pages, new alloys you've discovered, better forged layouts, the design for your rebuilt firepot. You sketch your sister's decorative bracket and name it the Flame Wing. You're no longer just the reader, you're the co-author now. The forge isn't much to look at. Visitors wrinkle their noses at the top roof and muddy floor. But then they see the work. They see the detail, the strength, the design, and they stop laughing. One even offers to help you build a proper roof, free, in exchange for a weather vane shaped like a stag. Deal. By the end of the month, the Ashforge has a new name, given not by you, but by the villagers. They start calling it the Phoenix Forge. At first, you scoff, but then you smile. Because they're right. You didn't just rebuild, you rose. You leave just after sunrise, the cart creaking beneath your weight and coal curled in the back, snoring like a drunk monk. Your sister hands you a bundle of wrapped meat and hard bread, shoves a folded list into your vest pocket, and slaps your shoulder hard enough to say both good luck and try not to die. You nod, give her half a smile, and start down the dirt road with the slow, resigned determination of someone who knows exactly how sore his spine's going to be by nightfall. You're a travelling smith now. For the first time in your life, you're taking the forge on the road, or what little of it you can carry. The anvil's strapped to the cart with ropes, flanked by tools, scrap metal, and one sad little brazier that's too small to be proud but too useful to leave behind. You've cobbled together a bellows system that runs on foot power, and you keep it lashed down with your sister's spare apron and a few prayers. The first village is 3 days away, long enough for your legs to cramp and your patience to fray. The road is little more than a scar through the forest, winding and muddy, with roots like claws and birds that screech like demons just when you're about to fall asleep. But the air is fresh, and you haven't seen Edric in weeks, which is its own kind of miracle. When you arrive, the village doesn't exactly throw a feast. People stare, suspicious as always. Who is this soot-stained man dragging a forge behind him like a coffin? You offer a free blade sharpening to the reeve, and suddenly you're not a stranger anymore. By nightfall, you've got 3 tool repairs, a cooking spit commission, and someone asking if you can make a locket for his wife, something strong but delicate. You nod and say, "That's what I do." You sleep in your cart that night, curled around your hammer like it's a child. Coal snores into your armpit. You're stiff in the morning, but happy. The travelling smith is a rare breed in this era. Most blacksmiths stayed rooted to one village, protected by guilds or lords, their work locked down like a castle drawbridge. But now and then one would roam, offering their skills in exchange for food, coin, shelter, or safety. You've become that man, untethered, self-made, a forge on wheels. And the best part? No one tells you what to make. You visit 5 villages over the next month. In one, you mend a bell tower's broken clapper using an iron bolt and sheer spite. In another, you patch a cracked cauldron for a grandmother who insists on paying you in stew, which turns out to be 90% turnip and 10% magic. A boy gives you a drawing of a sword shaped like a dragon, and you carve the hilt for him out of scrap with a smirk. You forge 3 dozen nails in a single day for a carpenter rebuilding a barn, and he gives you a hand-carved whistle shaped like a bird in return. You trade that whistle for a night in a dry bed, a loaf of real bread, and the best cider you've ever tasted. And then comes the town with no blacksmith at all. It's called Greystone, though you see precious little stone of any kind, just mud, timber, and desperation. You roll in just as a wagon collapses in the square, its wheels snapping like a bone. You pull up beside it, climb down and fix it with a splint, a borrowed nail, and a nail punch that's seen better centuries. The villagers gape. The next day your cart becomes the village forge. The brazier glows again, the hammer sings, the people line up, and you notice something odd. They keep looking behind you. Not at coal, not at your tools. They're looking for someone else. A master, a man with a beard and a growl, someone older. "You're really the blacksmith?" one woman asks. You don't answer. You just tap your hammer twice on the anvil and say, "Next!" By the 3rd day they've stopped asking. By the 5th they're bringing their children to watch. And then, in the middle of a clear-skied afternoon, a knight arrives. Not a baron's grunt. A real knight. Polished armour. Banner trailing in the wind. Horse that probably eats better than you. He dismounts in front of your cart and hands you a wrapped bundle without saying a word. You unwrap it and feel your breath catch. A sword. Long, curved, battered at the edges, the hilt wrapped in worn leather. And not just any sword, you recognise the make. Pattern welded. Not your design, but one you've studied. Seen in the journal, even. Ancient lines, subtle curves, a master's blade. "She needs to be reborn," the knight says. "Can you do it?" You run your thumb along the dulled edge, feel the bones of it, the story in the metal. "Yes," you say. It takes 3 days to restore the blade. You don't just polish it, you resurrect it, you reheat it, reshape the edge, replace the guard and whisper to it like it's alive. You use the vinegar technique from the journal, slow and steady. You rewrap the hilt in black leather, stitched with copper thread. The finished weapon hums in your hand like it knows it's back where it belongs. The knight takes it in both hands, tests the balance, and nods once. "You're not just a travelling smith," he says. You shrug. "Depends on the road." He tosses you a coin pouch heavier than any you've ever held. And before he leaves, he gives you something else. A small metal token stamped with the insignia of a major city's guild. "This," he says, "might open doors." You don't ask how he got it, you just tuck it away. That night, under a sky dusted with stars and smoke, you stare into your brazier and think about what you've become. Not just a smith, not just a survivor, but a traveller with fire in his cart, iron in his hands, and no master but the road ahead. The letter arrives on thick parchment, sealed with a dark wax, and the unmistakable impression of a stag's antlers. It's handed to you by a boy no older than 12, trembling slightly as he climbs down from a mottled grey horse. He looks exhausted, shoes falling apart, cheeks pink from cold. You offer him a chunk of bread, and he accepts it with a grateful nod before fleeing back into the trees like a rabbit avoiding hawks. You recognise the sigil right away. It belongs to Sir Aldrin, the wandering knight who once paid you silver for restoring the curved sword. You hadn't expected to hear from him again, much less receive a formal summons. The note inside is short and written in a hurried hand, but the words make your stomach lurch. Your skill is required. The forge must travel north, urgent and discreet. Bring only what you trust, A. There's no mention of coin, no description of the work, just the urgency, just your name, spelled correctly for once. You read it 3 times, then fold it carefully and tuck it into your vest. You don't sleep much that night. By morning, the cart is packed. Again. You check the straps twice, sharpen every tool, wrap your spare hammer in wax cloth. Your sister catches you loading the brazier and folds her arms. "You're leaving." "Just for a few days," you lie. She doesn't believe you. "What kind of forge job needs to be discreet?" You pause, the kind you can't talk about. She stares at you for a long moment, then ties a pouch of herbs to your belt and mutters, "Then come back breathing." Cole climbs into the cart on his own, like he already knows the drill. The road north is longer, colder and quieter than you expect. Fewer birds, more frost. The trees loom like skeletons, and the wind carries strange sounds, whispers maybe, or just your nerves getting the better of you. You arrive at dusk. The keep is not a keep in the grand sense, no towers, no banners fluttering above the battlements. It's more of a fortified manor, tucked deep into the woods, with stone walls sunk into a ridge like a buried secret. Guards meet you at the gate. They wear no sigils, no colours. Their armour is mismatched but well kept. Mercenaries maybe, or worse, soldiers of someone with more secrets than honour. They lead you into the courtyard, where a forge has already been assembled. Small, crude, but functional. There's no blacksmith here, just a pile of tools waiting for someone to make them sing. That someone is you. Sir Aldrin appears like a ghost, his armour clean, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," he says, motioning toward the forge. "We need something special." You nod. "What are we making?" He glances round, then steps closer. A blade, but not just any blade. He unwraps a cloth bundle, revealing an old rusted sword broken in 2. The edges are chipped, the hilt missing, the tang bent. But even in its ruined state it radiates something heavy. Not evil exactly, just old. Older than the keep, older than the man holding it. "This belonged to a king," Aldrin whispers. "Or maybe a priest. Or a killer. Depends on who you ask." You pick up the shards. They're heavier than they should be. The grain of the steel is unfamiliar, almost alien. You run your thumb along the break. "You want me to fix it? I want you to remake it." Here's a historical debate you'll appreciate. Were magical or cursed weapons just legends, or were they real? Steel, mixed with rituals, forged during eclipses, quenched in blood instead of oil. You've read the stories. You never thought you'd be part of one. That night, you light the forge. Not because you're ready, but because there's no time to wonder what you're about to create. You begin with the fragments, heating them, testing the grain, watching the colours change. It's strange, almost like the metal resists you at first. You try folding it, but the welds refuse to hold. The heat feels wrong, the blade shrieks when quenched, even in oil. So you do something you haven't done in months. You open the journal here, not the new pages, not your notes, but the old entries, the ones written by the hand you've never identified. You flip until you find a section labelled Iron that remembers. It's written in tighter script, symbols squeezed between lines, references to black iron, star metal, and an old method involving powdered charcoal, river clay, and a full moon. You check the sky, it's full tonight. You mix the materials, coat the fragments, and heat them again. This time the metal doesn't fight. It folds seamlessly, as if it wanted to be whole again, but only if you listened. 3 days pass, you don't sleep. Coal whines when you forget to eat. So Aldrin brings you food, but leaves you alone otherwise. You shape the blade slowly, carefully, tapering it into a curve that isn't quite a scimitar, but not a long sword either. Something in between. Something old. You craft a new hilt from ash wood, wrapping it in black leather bound with fine brass wire. You don't inscribe it, you don't dare, but you do place 3 tiny dots beneath the guard, the mark you've carried since childhood, your quiet signature. When it's finished, you hold it up in the moonlight. It doesn't gleam, it absorbs the light, swallowing it whole. The blade hums softly in your hand, not with magic, not with power, with memory. You give it to Aldrin, he doesn't ask you what you did, he just bows. I'll tell no one where it came from, he says, but it will do what must be done. You nod, exhausted. Just be careful what you cut. He rides out the next day, disappearing into the woods like a ghost. You remain behind for one more night, watching the coals go cold. Because you didn't just forge a weapon, you forged something that shouldn't exist, and now it's out there. A curious historical detail. Some blacksmiths were believed to have made blades that only revealed their true power once drawn in battle. Others made weapons that were never meant to be used, only kept, as warnings. You're not sure which kind you've just made, but you know this much. Whatever happens next, the fire remembers. You reach the tournament grounds before sunrise, your cart wobbling over the frost-hardened dirt road as banners snap overhead like impatient applause. This place is loud even when quiet. Horses snorting in their stalls, men barking orders, squires clattering buckets across the cobbles. Smoke from cooking fires hangs low like fog, and everything smells like meat, sweat, and whatever passes for glory among people who stab each other for sport. You've set up near the edge of the fairground, between a seller of waxed tunics and a woman who roasts almonds in a skillet the size of your cartwheel. She doesn't stop stirring, not even to make eye contact. The knights are the worst, she mutters. They want everything polished and aged and nothing paid for. You find out how right she is within the hour. A page, barely old enough to hold a dagger, let alone sharpen one, runs up, eyes wide with excitement. "Sir Halric needs his pauldrons adjusted," he shouts. "Before the melee!" He gestures wildly behind him to a cluster of tents so garish they look like they were sewn from stained glass windows. You sigh, grab your tools, and follow. Sir Halric is everything you expect. Towering, smug, draped in velvet-trimmed armour that's about as practical as it is humble. Which is to say, not at all. His chestplate shines like a mirror. His sword hilt sparkles with stones. His expression says he's never known hunger or humility. "You there," he says, without looking at you. "My left pauldron's pinching." Crouch beside him, adjust the leather strapping, and tighten the buckle so it doesn't shear his neck off the next time he turns too quickly. When you finish, you step back, waiting for thanks. Instead, he nods to the page. "Pay him." The page hands you a single copper coin. Your eyebrow twitches. You return to your stall and etch "No service without payment in advance" into a piece of scrap iron. Hang it like a warning. Still, you get business. More than you expect. Some of it's legitimate. Travelling mercenaries who want their blades honed. A woman who's lost the tip of her arrow extractor. A falconer who commissions a new clasp for his glove. But then come the bizarre requests. A minstrel wants a dagger that can fold into a belt buckle. A knight's cousin insists you forge invisible chainmail. A scholar asks if you can make a helmet that enhances thoughts. You tell him he's thinking with the wrong end. Here's a curious historical fact. Tournaments were less about war and more about display. Nobles didn't just want weapons, they wanted ornamented weapons, blades with gilded hilts, armour embossed with family crests, even shields shaped like mythological beasts. Practicality wasn't the goal, spectacle was, and you're a reluctant artist in the middle of it. Your sister would thrive here. You think about how she'd decorate a gauntlet to resemble a dragon's claw, or hammer spirals into the rim of a buckler until it caught the sun like jewellery. You try it once, just a little flourish on the end of a spearhead, and it sells immediately to a rich merchant who calls it battle couture. You don't even know what that means. Then you meet a knight unlike the others. He comes late in the day, armour dull, sword plain, eyes tired. He doesn't demand anything, just places his sword on the table and says, "It's grown dull." You inspect it. It's well made, though nothing special. But there's a mark near the hilt, a trio of notches filed in the steel. You point. "Your kill count?" He chuckles. "No, just reminders." You don't ask what they mean, but you sharpen the blade with care, oil the hilt, polish the fuller until it reflects like water. When you hand it back, he offers a coin pouch and says, "If I win, I'll commission something proper. If I lose, well, I won't need it." You watch him enter the melee the next morning. He moves like someone who's fought real battles. Less flair, more efficiency. His strikes are deliberate, his guard never flashy. He wins, quietly, without drama. When they crown him champion, he doesn't cheer, just nods, then disappears back into the crowd. Later that day, someone steals your hammer. Not just any hammer. Mule, your oldest, your favourite. The one with the cracked handle wrapped in leather cord and your initials burned into the base. You left it by the anvil while working on a breastplate repair, turned for half a second, and when you look back, it was gone. You tear apart your stall, ask every passerby, offer a reward, nothing. You don't sleep well that night. Losing a tool isn't just frustrating, it's like misplacing a limb. Mule wasn't the prettiest, or the most balanced, but it fit your hand perfectly. It remembered your swing, it had history. A fringe historical detail. Some blacksmiths believed that certain tools, if used long enough, absorbed part of the craftsman's soul. Losing one wasn't just bad luck, it was a genuine rupture. You understand that now. On the final day of the tournament, a boy returns a mule to your stall. He doesn't explain where he found it, just sets it gently on the table and runs off before you can thank or scold him. You pick it up. The handle's warm. It smells faintly of roses, and there's a new nick on the head, one you don't recognise. You smile. You forge a new chisel that evening, using mule and the pattern-welded blade to split a stubborn iron rod. The edge cuts clean. Perfect. You etch 3 tiny stars into the base, not because anyone will see them, just because. You pack up the next morning. The merchant stalls are already half gone. The roasted almond woman waves you off without pausing her stir. You leave the sign, "No service without payment," hanging on a tree branch, just in case anyone else tries to get clever. You ride south again, cart a little heavier with coin, hands a little lighter from trade. You're not rich, but you're remembered, and in the life of a travelling smith that's worth more than gold. You meet her when your cartwheel breaks. It's the middle of nowhere, one of those nameless patches of countryside where the sky feels too big and the wind tastes like dust and old wood. You hit a rut you didn't see coming, the wheel shudders, then collapses with a gut-wrenching crack. You curse hard, the kind of word you reserve for moments when life decides to test your patience and balance at the same time. Cole just lifts his head, unimpressed, and curls up again in the cart like a noble who's decided this breakdown isn't his problem. You're still muttering to yourself when a voice calls out from behind a hedge. "Need help, or are you just arguing with the cart?" You turn to see a woman standing there, hands on her hips, face half-shadowed under the brim of a wide straw hat. She's got flour on her sleeves and a crooked grin that says she's already judging you and finding it mildly entertaining. "Broken axle," you say, wiping your forehead, and not enough daylight left to curse it back together. She steps forward and squints at the wheel. "You've got a forge in that cart, but no spare bolt?" You blink. "I didn't think I'd need one." Famous last words. She introduces herself as Mare, daughter of the village brewer, though she says it like an apology. "He makes ale," she explains. "I make it better." She offers you a place to rest while you fix the wheel, and before you can think of a reason to say no, you're following her down a narrow path that leads to a low timber house that smells like hops, wood smoke and bread. Inside, everything is warm. Not just the hearth, which burns low and steady, but the feeling of the place. There's dried lavender hanging from the beams, a black cat snoozing on a barrel, and the faint, yeasty hum of fermentation in the air. She pours you a cup of ale without asking and slides a plate of stew your way like she's been feeding blacksmiths for years. You should be fixing the cart, but you're still sitting there an hour later, listening to Mayor rant about the local lord's refusal to fund road repairs. "He's too busy polishing his signet rings," she says, rolling her eyes. "Bet he couldn't tell an axle from an armpit." You find yourself laughing. Proper, belly-deep laughing. The kind you haven't done since your sister smeared soot across Edric's face and told the village he was cursed. You stay the night, can't be damned. The next morning you rise early and forge a new axle bolt in Mare's stone baking hearth, using your travel bellows and a few pieces of iron from a broken plough she had lying around. It's not perfect, but it'll hold. When you go to leave, she walks you to the cart and says, "You know, you're not as grumpy as you look." You give her your best deadpan. "I'll work on it." She smirks, then holds up a small iron ring. "Found this on the hearth after you left it hot. Might have been a mistake." You reach for it, but she tucks it into her apron. Too late. It's mine now. You don't argue. Later, as you roll into the next village, you realise you're still smiling. You start writing letters. Not that you're good at it. Your penmanship looks like someone let a chicken run across the page with ink on its feet, but you write anyway. Short notes at first. Passed through Larkhill, made a hinge that looks like a crow's wing. Saw a knight fall off his horse mid-prayer. Sharpened a blade so clean it cut a fly in half mid-air. Probably an accident. And Mare writes back. Her letters smell like hops and honey. She tells you about her brewing experiments, about a new recipe that involves berries and magic, though the magic might just be good luck. She describes the cat's war with a local squirrel and how she's thinking of adding a second oven to her kitchen. You start timing your travel so that your route always loops back past her door. Each time you stay a little longer. She starts setting aside a corner of the hearth for your bellows, a shelf for your tools, a hook for your apron. One morning you wake up and realise your hammer hasn't left her kitchen in weeks. Here's a sweet historical tidbit for you. Blacksmiths rarely married young. The job was too hard, the hours too long, and the expectations too rooted in the work. But when they did marry, it was often to someone equally industrious. Brewers, bakers, midwives, herbalists, people who knew how to tend heat, how to measure things by feel, how to burn their hands and keep working. Mary is all of that. You forge her an iron ring, not a perfect circle, but close. There's a dent near the joint where you struck too hard, distracted by the smell of bread baking. She loves it. "Never thought I'd want to smell like smoke," she says, sliding it on. "But it's grown on me." You don't make a speech, you just kiss her hand and go back to the forge. You still travel, but not as far. You stay close, work local. The villagers stop seeing you as a curiosity and start seeing you as one of their own. Kids bring you scrap metal like it's treasure. Mare's father stops grumbling and starts referring to you as the hammer boy. You pretend to hate it. You make new things. Decorative iron spouts shaped like dragon heads. Hinges that creak on purpose just because Mare says they sound like laughter. A fire poker shaped like a stag's antler. You forge tools for farmers who leave extra eggs in your basket. You fix the village bell tower's clapper. You help build a new sign for the tavern with your sister's signature curls in the frame, and you hang a new sign outside your home. Blacksmith and brewer saw, by fire and yeast. People laugh, but they come, and for once you're not just surviving, you're building something with someone. Something that doesn't clang or burn or get quenched in oil. Something that endures. Something warm. You always assumed retirement was for men who couldn't lift a hammer anymore. Those with crooked backs, wine-stained tunics, and the smell of liniment clinging to their skin like a second layer. The kind of smiths who told long stories about blades that never really existed, sitting by the fire pretending they didn't miss the forge as much as they missed their teeth. You figured you'd keep working until your heart stopped mid-swing and someone had to pry the hammer from your calloused hand. But retirement, as it turns out, doesn't come all at once. It sneaks in, a rest day here, a skipped sharpening there, a morning when you sleep past the rooster and no one screams for a horseshoe. A week when the anvil stays cold, not because there's no work, but because you just didn't feel like doing it. You're not done, exactly. Just slower. And you've earned it. Your sister has taken over more of the forge now. She runs it like a general runs a battlefront, decisively, with zero tolerance for fools, and an artistic flair that would have made the old guildmasters clutch their pearls. She added new tools, refined the brazier's airflow, even carved a signature pattern into the handle of her hammer, a spiral overlaid with a sunburst. The village calls it the Dawn Mark. You pretend not to be proud. Mare handles everything else, the brewing, the books, the bartering. She's transformed the back half of the house into a workspace that smells like roasted malt and confidence. The ale she produces now gets carted 2 towns over, praised for its smooth bite and warm finish. She started calling one batch Forge Fire after your suggestion. Now it sells faster than she can make it. You joke that it's because she's finally figured out how to weaponize yeast. Even Cole's slowing down. His muzzle's gone grey, his limp a little more pronounced. He doesn't bark at strangers anymore, just gives them a slow blink that says, "I've seen worse than you, and I'm too tired to care." He still sleeps under the forge bench, same spot as always. Sometimes you drop bits of bread crust there, just to watch him wake up with a snort and a sneeze, but life has a way of keeping things interesting. One late autumn afternoon a messenger shows up. Not a page, not a knight. A woman in a long cloak with sharp eyes and a sword too fine for her plain clothes. She waits until you've finished repairing a weather vane, then steps forward and says, "I've heard stories about a smith, one who makes iron sing." You raise an eyebrow. Lots of those around. "This one," she says, "forged a blade from ruins, folded it by moonlight, tempered it with memory." Your stomach tightens. She holds out a small cloth-wrapped object. You unwrap it slowly. Inside is a piece of iron, no bigger than your thumb, etched with a mark you haven't seen in years. The triple dot star, the one from the old journal, your journal. "Where did you get this?" you ask, voice low. She doesn't answer right away, just looks toward the hills. They say it came from the east, passed hand to hand, a token of craft, of story, of blood well spent. You're not sure what she wants from you. Advice, a blade, a name? But what she says next stops you cold. "There are others," she says, "other forges. Quiet ones, hidden, like yours used to be, and they're asking questions, looking for the source." You stare at the iron piece. It's warm in your palm, not from the sun, not from the forge, just warm. There's a historical debate buried here. Did master smiths intentionally spread their knowledge through apprenticeships and journals, or did it happen by accident, by blades passed on, stories half told, sparks leaping from one forge to the next? You've always believed it was both. You tell the woman to stay the night. Over stew and mare's best ale, she shares tales from the eastern marches, places where the roads have names no one in your village could pronounce, where wars are brewing again, and people are remembering the value of a well-forged sword. She doesn't ask you to come, she doesn't need to. The air between her words is invitation enough. You think about the pattern-welded blade, the one you forged years ago, still hanging above the hearth, untouched but never forgotten. You think about the journal and the new pages you've added, the diagrams, the stories, the misfires and lessons. Maybe it's time to share it, so you make a copy, painstakingly, line by line, sketch by sketch. Your sister helps, Mare helps. You even let a wide-eyed apprentice from the next town come read through the pages once, under supervision. The apprentice nearly passes out when she sees the section titled "Blades that hum when struck." You seal the copy with your mark and hand it to the woman. She bows, not deeply, not theatrically, just enough to say, "I understand what this is." Then she disappears into the mist. And you breathe. Not because you're finished, but because the fire is still spreading. Here's something most histories forget. Blacksmiths weren't just labourers, they were law keepers, gatekeepers, secret keepers. Their fires lit more than just metal, they lit roads, ideas, futures, and you've kept that flame burning, not just in steel, but in story. Winter comes, Cole sleeps more and more. Mare invents a warm ale that tastes like cinnamon and relief. Your sister starts training an apprentice of her own, a farm girl with a sharp tongue and a sharper eye for symmetry. You spend your days repairing tools, fixing hinges, shaping the occasional custom piece. And when no one's looking, you swing the hammer once or twice just to hear the anvil sing, because some sounds never grow old, and some fires never die. It's the ringing that wakes you, bright, fast, wrong. Not the steady rhythm of a blacksmith swing, not even the erratic beat of a novice, but something harder, desperate. Metal striking metal with no patience, no grace. It's early, barely dawn, and the mist still clings to the grass like a blanket of old ghosts. You blink yourself awake, Throw on your boots and follow the sound to the forge. There in the pale morning light is the apprentice. Not your sister's, yours. You didn't plan to take one, didn't even realise you had taken one. But the boy from the next village, Jonas, gangly and always smudged with soot, started showing up more and more. At first just sweeping, then watching, then handing you tools before you asked. One day, without thinking, you said, "Hold this," and he did. Steady, focused, like it mattered. Since then, he's been there every morning before you. And now he's at your anvil, hammering a twisted rod of iron like he's trying to exorcise it. He doesn't see you at first, just keeps swinging, jaw clenched, breath coming hard, he's red in the face, sweat dripping from the end of his nose. You step closer and see the iron is cracked. Ruined, really. He's hammering it wrong, heating it unevenly, striking off tempo. You don't scold him. You just take the hammer from his hand, gently, like you're untangling a knot in his chest. He steps back, ashamed. I wanted to practice. I thought I could do it." You nod slowly. You can, but not like that. You set the metal aside, still hot, and sit on the edge of the workbench. "What's bothering you?" He hesitates. Then it pours out. His father's sick. The farm's failing. His mother's sowing all night to trade for grain. Jonas thought if he could make something good, something sellable, he could bring home a few coins. You listen without interrupting, the old ache in your chest flaring up. You remember being young, hungry, desperate to prove you were worth the food it took to keep you alive. So you teach him. Properly, this time. You reheat the billet together, slowly, evenly. You guide his hands over yours as he taps the metal into shape, not forcing it, but listening, feeling when it yields, when it pushes back. You teach him to use his ears as much as his eyes. The rhythm of the hammer becomes a kind of heartbeat. Later that day, he finishes his first blade. It's ugly, but it's right. He hands it to you, eyes wide with hope, and you nod once. Now make another. This is how the teaching begins in earnest. Not formal, not planned, but steady. One lesson after another. How to read the colour of bore of the heated steel. How to brace the tongs without strain. How to grind an edge without burning it dull. He soaks it all up like a dry sponge. His hands get stronger, his strikes more sure. He burns himself, of course, drops a hammer on his foot once, curses like a soldier when he slips and dents a nearly finished tool. You just hand him a fresh billet and say, "Do it again." Here's a historical truth often left out of textbooks. Many of the best smiths never trained in a formal guild. They learned in fields, in back alleys, in villages where the fire was the only teacher, and the anvil the only authority. Apprenticeships weren't always sealed with contracts. They were forged in sweat, failure, and stubbornness. You begin to see yourself in Jonas. Not because he mimics you, he doesn't. He's messier, more impulsive, but he cares. He wants to be good, wants to build something, not just repair it. That's rarer than people think. One day, he shows you a blade he's made in secret. You recognise the pattern. He's tried to replicate your old design, the one with the triple twist down the centre. It's crooked, slightly off balance, but you feel a flicker in your chest. It's close. You tell him to keep going. Meanwhile, your sister is mentoring her own apprentice, a sharp-eyed girl named Leave, with hands like clockwork and a stare that could split iron. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, it's usually to point out that someone's measurements are off by a hair. She files her chisels with surgical precision and prefers working in silence. You once saw her polish a hinge for an hour straight, only to toss it aside and start over without a word. Jonas tries to impress her, fails repeatedly, but the two of them work better together than apart. They start finishing each other's work without asking. One lays the rivets, the other seals them. One quenches, the other tempers. They bicker like siblings, but their rhythm is perfect. You and your sister watch them sometimes, sitting on opposite sides of the forge. You don't say it out loud, but it's there in the silence. The future is in good hands. A curious historical footnote. Some medieval forges became dynasties, not of blood but of skill. One master trained 2 apprentices, those 2 taught 4, and soon the region's tools, weapons and trade routes all bore the echo of a single forge's rhythm, legacy through labour. One day Jonas hands you a set of hinges he's made, beautiful ones, curled at the edge like fern fronds. You trace the lines with your fingers and ask, "Why this shape?" He shrugs. "No reason, just felt right." You smile. That's the reason. You start writing again, more carefully this time. Not just notes for yourself, but instructions. Pages and pages of diagrams, techniques. mistakes, and fixes. You include drawings of tools, sharpening methods, forge safety. You ask Mare to help organise them. She laughs and says you've finally admitted you're not going to live forever. You don't argue, because this isn't just for you anymore. It's for Jonas, for Liev, for whoever picks up a hammer 50 years from now and wonders what kind of idiot first figured out how to keep a blade from cracking during the quench. You write your name on the cover and scratch it out. Instead, you just title it The Phoenix Forge Manual. Simple, honest, and true. Starts with the sky turning green, not a soft spring green or the gentle hue of moss after rain. This is a bruised, sickly colour, like the world's holding its breath and forgetting how to exhale. The wind comes next, not howling, but pressing, heavy, dense, like walking through water. You step outside, a soot-smeared rag in hand, and feel the shift in your bones before your brain has time to process it. You've lived through enough seasons, storms and battles to know when something's off. And this, whatever this is, isn't just weather. Then the bells begin ringing. First from the southern hill, where the chapel's supposed to stay silent unless someone's died or gotten married. Both rare occurrences lately. Then another joins in further off. The kind of wild, panicked bell ringing that comes when someone's not sure whether to pray or run. By the time Jonas arrives, breathless and wild-eyed, you already know what he's going to say. "Riders," he gasps. "Dozens, maybe more. Flags I've never seen." You don't panic, you just nod, pat him on the shoulder and walk to the forge. You've practiced for this. Not war, not exactly. But defence. The drills you forced on yourself after the last siege. The way you taught your hands to move fast even when your head was screaming. You don't need armour, just iron. You gather spikes, bars, broken tools, anything sharp or heavy. Your sister joins you within minutes, her apron already small or smeared with soot. She's got the flat-headed sledge in one hand and a coil of wire in the other. "We barricading or bracing?" she asks. You don't answer. Because Mare appears behind her, sleeves rolled, clutching a cast-iron pan like it's a battle-axe. She doesn't speak, but her eyes say, "Whatever happens, I'm not hiding." A practical detail, most villages didn't have militias. Defence was often improvised. Blacksmiths, brewers, farmers, whoever could swing a stick or sharpen a pitchfork. They didn't win wars, but they slowed them down. The first signs of the riders come an hour later. Dust clouds on the western trail far beyond the old bridge. Then glimpses of armour. Not polished, not royal. The patchwork look of mercenaries hired cheap and told to look mean. Their banners flap weakly, black with a red streak. You don't recognise the sigil, but it doesn't matter. You know exactly what they want. Fear. Jonas wants to stand at the gate. You send him to the bell tower instead, where the crossbow is hidden. You're no good to anyone if they gut you in the first 10 seconds. You mutter. He doesn't argue, just nods and climbs. You reinforce the forge walls, not for defence, no one expects this to turn into a siege, but to protect what matters. The journal, the apprentice's work, the blades that haven't yet been sharpened. You tuck the Phoenix manual into a waterproof satchel and slide it into the same brick hollow where your father once hid his flask. Mare finds you hammering spikes into a beam. "Your hands are shaking," she says. "I'm fine." They weren't shaking during the fire. You stop, look at her. "I wasn't married during the fire." She doesn't say anything, just steps beside you and hammers the next spike in. When the riders finally arrive, they don't charge. That's the worst part. They just watch. 10 men at first, lined across the road like theatre masks, blank, expressionless. Their captain dismounts, strides forward and reads a proclamation no one asked for. The local lands have been requisitioned by a lord you've never heard of. All properties, forges and supplies are now subject to seizure. Your sister spits in the dirt. You don't say anything. You walk back into the forge and bring out the rusted hammer. Mule, the one that never breaks. You hold it loose in one hand and wait. The captain sighs. "You'll regret that." "No," you say. "I've regretted things before. This won't be one of them." The fight starts small, always does. One soldier steps forward, then another. Then someone throws a stone and suddenly everything moves at once. You don't remember most of it, just flashes. Your sister swinging like a hurricane, knocking a blade sideways with such force it flies from the man's hand. Mare hurling hot embers from a shovel into someone's face. Jonas yelling from the bell tower, "Don't know now," right before a crossbow bolt whistles through the air and plants itself squarely in a mercenary's chest. You crack someone's knee with mule and feel the vibration travel up your arm like a blessing. Cole, half lame and growling like he's 20 years younger, launches himself at an ankle and doesn't let go. And then it's over. They're because you won, but because they weren't expecting a fight. Mercenaries, after all, aren't paid to die. They're paid to scare. And you, your sister, Mare, Jonas, Liev, the village, all of you refuse to be scared. They retreat, bleeding, swearing, furious, but they leave, and you remain. Later that night you sit by the forge and take stock. 1 cracked rib, 3 broken tools, a scorched leather apron, 2 villagers wounded, but not mortally. Cole's paw is wrapped in linen, and Mare insists on inspecting your scalp for damage you can't feel. Jonas sets the crossbow down and finally breathes. Liev has already gone back to filing. You watch the fire burn low and think about the old stories, the ones where blacksmiths were heroes, defenders, quiet forces that held their communities together through steel and sweat. You never believed those stories. Until now. Here's something the scholars forget. Defence isn't always about walls. Sometimes it's about refusal. The refusal to run, to kneel, to hand over the thing you've built with blood and ash and 1,000 ruined shirts. You defended your forge today. But more than that, you defended the people it holds. The fire flickers. You toss another billet in, because tomorrow the work begins again. You wake up sore in places you didn't know could be sore. Not just your back or your shoulders, but strange spots, between your ribs, under your thumbs, inside your eyelids. It's the kind of full-body ache that means you didn't just live through something, you carried it. You roll over in bed, groaning like an old plank, and find Mare already up, humming low as she stirs a pot by the hearth. "You survived," she says, without turning. "Barely." She sets a mug of hot ale in your hand, not sweet this time, but sharp, infused with ginger, and something bitter that makes your tongue tingle. Drink that. You'll feel less like a stepped-on horseshoe. You sip, and she's right. Outside, the forge still stands. The roof's got a new dent, and one shutter is hanging by a single hinge, but it's there. Smoke rises. The anvil glints. It looks like someone tried to erase it and failed. Jonas is already hammering. Not metal, nails. He's helping the carpenter rebuild a broken fence near the village green. Liev is with him, sharpening a set of chisels while chewing a piece of bread like it owes her money. You nod at them, but they don't stop working, don't even look up. That's how you know they're all right. You pass the place where the mercenaries fell, marked now with disturbed soil and a pair of broken spear tips. No one talks about it. No one really needs to. But the children have stopped playing near that path, and someone, probably your sister, left a pair of rusted tongs stuck into the dirt like a marker. A warning, a monument, both. The village changes after the fight, subtly at first. People start leaving small gifts on your workbench, eggs, herbs, and even a carved whistle shaped like a wolf. No one says thank you, not out loud, but they come to you more readily, trust more easily. The hedge witch from the western ridge even asks if you'll reinforce her cauldron. "It leaks," she says. "Spells shouldn't leak." You fix it, of course, because now the forge is more than a place where iron is shaped. It's become something else, a symbol, a centre. You take it seriously, so you clean, you organise, you sharpen every tool until they gleam. You hang a new sign above the entrance, the Phoenix Forge, with Mare's flourished script carved deep into the grain. You forge a wind vane in the shape of a rising flame and install it on the roof. The villagers love it, the chickens hate it. Here's a quirky bit of history for you. Some medieval blacksmiths were given honorary titles after acts of bravery. Master of Flame, Keeper of the Iron Cross, Forge Father. None of them meant much outside their villages, but they mattered to the people. You overhear someone call you the Hammerman one day, and the name sticks. Kids whisper it like a spell. If you lie, one boy says, the Hammerman hears it on the wind. You consider being offended. But deep down, you smile. You and your sister hold a small celebration on the forge's birthday. A full year since its rebuilding. It's nothing grand, just stew, bread, ale, and laughter. But there's music. Someone brings a lute. Liev sings, off-key but with such passion you don't care. Jonas juggles tongs until one nearly crushes his toe. You drink too much, kiss Mare too long in front of the entire village, and nearly fall into the brazier. The next morning you wake with a hangover and an idea. The blade you forged for Sir Aldrin still sits over the hearth, untouched since the day you made it. You pull it down, test the balance, feel the hum in your palm. It still remembers you, still responds, so you wrap it carefully and ride out with Jonas toward the east, retracing the path that woman once described. It's a quiet journey, just the creak of the cart, the rhythm of hoofbeats, and the occasional grunt from Cole, who insisted on coming even though he clearly regrets it. You find a village that doesn't have a smith, not anymore. The last one died in the plague and his tools sit rusting behind a shed. You stop, you talk, you teach a boy how to hold a hammer, you leave behind 3 nails, 2 hinges and the blade. No one asks why, you just say, every fire needs a place to catch, and you return home. After that, it becomes a ritual. Every few months, you ride out to another village. You bring scrap metal, extra tongs, blueprints from your manual. Sometimes you stay a day, sometimes longer. You light forges where there were none, relight ones that were dying. You don't call yourself a teacher, but you are. That's the historical truth. Not all legacies are carved in stone. Most are hammered into hinges, hidden in tools, etched into the memory of hands that once reached for something hot and dangerous and didn't flinch. You're older now. Not old, but enough that you grunt when you kneel and groan when you get back up. Mare jokes that your bones creak louder than the bellows. You've got a white streak in your beard and a scar on your knuckle from the night of the mercenary raid. You've never been prouder of either. You've built a forge, a family, a future, and it all came from flame, from the brutal, beautiful life of shaping iron not just into tools or weapons, but into meaning, into memory. Your sister retires from the forge before you do. Says her hands are better for holding children than hammers now. You tease her and she smacks you with a glove. You still visit the anvil every day. Maybe not to work, but to listen. Because sometimes when it's quiet you swear it still sings, the sound of steel, the rhythm of fire, the music of the hammer. Your story isn't carved into castle stone. It won't be sung by bards or scratched into holy books, but it lives in the curve of a well-made hinge, in the swing of a balanced blade, in every forge where a fire catches because you once stood at an anvil and refused to let it die. So now, here you are, older, slower, but still not done. You sit outside the forge at twilight wrapped in a wool cloak with Cole's greying head resting on your foot and Mare beside you, sipping from a shared mug of her spice cider. The fire's burning low, just enough to throw the shadows against the anvil and bathe the shop in a flickering familiar glow. You've long since finished the big jobs. These days, you fix more hinges than halberds. And that's fine. There's a strange peace in the little things. In a garden gate that doesn't creak. In a pot hook that holds just right. In the soft thank you someone leaves with a loaf of bread. The journal's full now. Every page, diagrams, notes, mistakes, crossed out and corrected. Even a few smudges where Murray spilled tea on a section about blade tempering. You've added sketches of Jonas's designs, leaves decorative tongs, and a few crude poems your sister dared you to write. It's not perfect, but it's yours, and more importantly, it's theirs now. They've started calling it the book, like it's a sacred text. You pretend not to be flattered. You know you'll pass it on soon. Maybe not officially, maybe not with a ceremony or speech, just a quiet moment, a hand on the shoulder, a fire already lit, a historical truth. Most blacksmiths weren't remembered by name, but they were remembered by what they made, the bridges that didn't collapse, the swords that didn't fail, the hinges that didn't squeak. They lived on in iron and memory. You smile at that, because you've done more than survive. You built something, through ash, through fire, through loss, you endured, and your forge, the Phoenix Forge, will keep burning long after you've gone. You close your eyes, the wind's picking up now, soft and cool, rustling the leaves like a lullaby. Cole lets out a long sigh. Mare leans against your shoulder. From inside the forge you hear the ring of a hammer, Jonas still working late. You don't need to look, you know the rhythm. It's yours, and it's theirs now. Sleep well, the fire's still burning.